All right, thank you and welcome all to the City of Hutchinson City Council meeting for the date of October 15th, 2019, 9 a.m. meeting. Linda, would you please call the roll?
Deckent?
Here.
Daveline?
Here.
Soldner?
Here.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Here.
Inskeep?
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't see our normal pastor in the audience, so I asked Steve if he'd be so kind to have the morning prayer for us. Steve?
Dear God, thank you for this pleasant fall day. Thank you for the seasons that we have in this, our state and our city. Guide us this day and always, and especially for this council as we consider issues and make decisions, that we have your guidance to make the best decisions for our city and for our citizens. We also ask for your protection of those in our community who are first responders and protect us each and every day. And again, thank you. For these things we pray. Amen.
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 Very good. Next item.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
Perfect. This is the portion of the meeting where we invite those in the audience that want to address council on items that are not on the agenda. We ask that you announce yourself, give your name and your address, approach the podium over here, and limit your remarks to 5 minutes. Again, this is for items that are not on the agenda. We've got a taker.
Thank you.
Morning, Laurel.
Good morning, Steve. Lavrel Pounds. I reside at 512 East Avenue A here in Hutchinson. I was up here a couple weeks ago, and last meeting when I was here, I gave you a list of 41 pictures of violations of the city. I've been around and have checked. I see and appreciate some of the work that's being done. Memorial Hall has been taken care of on a couple of those issues. I see also that water well number 2 is being worked on. I did call in yesterday, though, and talk to Mr. Combs to find out what was going on with the one I had major concerns with was with the city trees. Sidewalks in Avenue A Park, outside the city offices here, and also against the park across the street. I was a little disturbed about his comment. His comment was, well, we're seeing what we can do about it. And saying what we need to do to take care of it. It's a city code. I mean, the code is in your books. It was put in 1994. I don't think there's a reason for you guys to be looking for separate sets of rules. There's one code, and it should be for everybody: landowners, as for landlords, homeowners, and the city. Period. It should just be one. There obviously is 2, one for landlords and one for residential homeowners. That's pretty evident, and you can't say that's not correct. What I'm really getting upset about and nervous about is seeing that there's possibly going to be 3 sets, one now for the city. Part of those violations, 3 of them were trees that are right there on Main Street in the beautification park that went in down there. The code, and I could read it, I've got it here in the books. I think you've looked at it, though. It was in the last one I gave you. States no tree shall be planted within 10 feet of a fire plug. There's 3 of them that are there. They were planted after that code was in place. Didn't pertain to the, you didn't watch the code, and there's no reason for them not to be removed. I don't like the idea of waiting around to see if you can come up with an idea of how you can skirt around this and leave the trees there and not trim the trees. That's not the case. That should not be done. So on that part of it, I appreciate the work that's being done, but again, I don't think there's 3 sets of rules, and it looks like there's going to be that, and I don't care for that. On the housing part of it there, again, on the issues here, some of these inspections that are coming up, I believe, aren't issues that should be addressed at this point. They don't have anything to do with the livability of that property. I had 4 codes on a property over here on 115 Maple Street. 1 broken storm window that the tenant had put some tape on I had to replace. 1 backflow preventer in the front. The tenant had a recliner on the back patio. I was told to remove that recliner. All of these violations, not done in 30 days, you'll be taken to court. The one that really upset me was told me to clean my gutters out on one side of the house. Now, none of that has anything to do with the livability of a property. And if they're going to micromanage our properties, that tightly, my comment is, again, that's why I'm here. You will start to be micromanaged. I can read code books. I pull them all up, and I can find these ones out here that you're saying, aren't those pretty petty about getting the trees off 8 feet above? Yes, they are. Cleaning my gutters is pretty petty on a rental property.
Now, you're not suggesting there should be a fourth set of codes that applies to you, though, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm pointing out that that is code, and that's fine. If you're
And
going to
if we're
enforce
adhering
those,
to the code, then
if
you
you're
need to
going to
be
enforce them, those little ones like that on those inspections, I can do the very same thing.
It's fair. It's absolutely
Absolutely correct.
But you can't
So-
argue that you're not
Nope.
that it's petty and it should be.
Nope.
If it's in the code, it's in the code.
It's in the code, absolutely,
Okay, just wanna make
absolutely.
sure
I
we're
have
on
no
the same
problem
page.
with that. I'm
Okay.
saying, though, it's one of those cases, pick your battles.
Sure.
You're going after the ones that are bad, the ones that are not safe for the residents to live in. The only ones we ever hear about are the ones no running water, going to feces in a bucket and that, whatever. You probably are 1%, maybe 2% of those in the city, okay? But those are the only ones we ever hear about. Telling me to clean gutters on a property is pretty bad. I was given a notice to mow the lawn, and the tenant had not kept it up. I picked up the notice on September 9th. I had till September 15th to pick up the notice according to the certified letter sheet from the city. When I picked it up on the 9th, it just so happened that that was the due date. That was the last date I had to mow that lawn, or the city was going to come in and mow it and charge me for it. Wait a minute. That's 6 days later. I still could have picked that up. My notice, I didn't have to pick that up till the 15th. It just so happened I picked it up on the 9th. I'd actually mowed it on about the 7th, so it didn't matter. If you're going to send out those notices, though, I think you better start coordinating those, because, again, if you'd have mowed that, I wouldn't have paid for it. I had till the 15th to pick it up. Watch what you're doing. Cross your T's and dot your I's. That's kind of what I'm looking at this point here. I don't care for that part. The other thing is, if you're going to do those and you send out these certifications of rental compliance sheets, that property on Maple Street was inspected on 11 of 2017, and it passed. I had 3 years on that, so that was till November of 2020. Well, lo and behold, I get a notice that I'm in violation on that same property. Now I get one, and I went ahead and fixed them because they were minor, no problem, and I do take care of my properties. But now I have one that says it's good from September 19. Well, I really had another whole 13, 14 months to go before I needed to fix anything on that property, because I had a compliance sheet from the city. So again, if you're going to do those, I think you need to make sure that those compliance records aren't overlapped, okay? My main thing is, again, though, I don't like the idea of different sets of rules, and that's what you're coming up on. Just about done here. I see you looking at your watch.
No,
problem.
you're good. You're good. I
No
just want to
problem.
make sure. No, you're good.
The other thing I have is this election coming up, your elections, I know some of you up for re-election, comes up in November. The housing code doesn't sunset till the end of December. My question is, what is your hurry to get this pushed through before the election? I think this is an issue that should follow through with whoever's going to have to, again, deal with it for the next 2 years or 4 years, depending on however your election parts go. There's time to do that after that. If you want to push a certain agenda through, then yes, I guess keep on going. But that election is not until November, and it doesn't sunset until December. I think that should be an issue that the new city council should take care of. There is also an option, I believe this is correct, that if it gets pushed through, and if some elections change, it can certainly be brought right back up, and we can certainly bring it right back on the table and get rid of it if we have people coming in. I think that's going to tell you how the citizens are wanting this issue taken care of. And that's, again, you're here to take care of and listen to the city residents, not just the committee members, okay? And I just don't think you're listening to that part of it. I think there's some of you that have an agenda that you want it through, and you want that housing thing done, and that's it, at all costs. And it's just, our city is falling apart as far as coming and talking together with people. You see so much turmoil. We hear it all the time in the business, and I don't care for that. Anyway, those are the few comments I've got there. In 2 weeks, I'll probably be back again with another list, and the next list will probably start pertaining to, again, your trees. You better start, the code state that have to be 12 feet above any street clearance, 14 on any major arterial street. But I would like to know, and I would like to have some conference with Mr. Combs again, I went down there and checked at the park this morning. You've got 2 and 3 inch limbs that are well below 6 feet. And the code says 8 feet above the sidewalks. Those pictures that you have, I don't know if I mentioned it the last time, 8 feet is above the very top part of that rod, which you can't see half the time. The very bottom is 6 feet.
Well, we
Okay.
thank you for bringing it to our attention,
All
and
right.
I know, and I'm glad to hear also that so many of them have been addressed. I know we've been following it, so we spoke with John, and
And I appreciate that.
we'll keep plugging at it, but
Okay,
keep bringing them, and we'll
Will
keep
do.
going from there.
thank you.
Thank you, Laverl.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laverl.
Anybody else who wants to address the council at this time? I recognize this young man. Come on up. There's a young gentleman I had the occasion of visiting with last Friday. He's working on his Eagle. And again, the same rules apply. If you'll state your name and your address, and then limit your remarks to 5 minutes.
My name is Oren Tesh. I live at 1104 East 95th Street in Hutch. I was wanting to address the fact that there's a lack of jobs around for those who are injured and can't properly work in other areas in which have job openings, like my dad, who has a back that was messed up from having a fridge basically dropped on him. And others who just can't get on disability, but they need to work to support their families, and they can't find jobs around to do that aren't just going to make the issue worse with them. And
Very good. Yeah, it is a concern, and there is a certain population of our community and all communities that have, whether it be disabilities or long-term or short-term disabilities, and trying to find gainful employment that doesn't either aggravate that disability or preclude them from being able to do the work is a challenge. I certainly hope maybe you come to some conclusions or have some ideas, and if we can get that to the business communities or those employers that have some say over that, that's something I think we'd all appreciate. So wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Thank you, Warren.
Have a good one. And good luck with your career in the Scouts. Very good. Anybody else who wants to address the council at this time? Items not on the agenda. Seeing none, next item, if you would, please.
Item 5, consent agenda.
Any questions, or is there a motion with regards to the consent?
I would move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded. Linda, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6A, public hearing to consider issuance of Wesley Towers Healthcare Facilities refunding bonds.
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Angela Richard, Director of Finance. On September 17th, the City Council approved a resolution of intent for refinancing IRBs on behalf of Wesley Towers for an amount not to exceed $4,555,000. Today, we need to conduct a public hearing as required by the IRS. It either has to be approved, or we either have to conduct a public hearing or it has to be approved by voters. The next step after we close the public hearing is to approve the ordinance authorizing the refunding. As a reminder, there is no obligations incurred by the city. We are a conduit of the debt. We also incur no costs for the refinancing. And we will need to authorize the mayor to sign the pertinent documents that are included. One of those is a supplemental lease. As you know, we are a leaseholder for Wesley Towers until the bonds are paid off. So that is why that is included there. Are there any questions?
Just one question I have, and I know it was in the material. What's the maturity date on the bonds?
Oh. I would have to look. I cannot.
Are they 20 year, 15, 20? Just curious.
I'm trying to find
That's
that.
fine.
Kevin, go ahead. Yeah.
Kevin?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kevin would know. Okay.
Perfect.
It's in 2038. So
2038.
the maturity is being extended a little bit. They're restructuring some of the bonds as part of the refinancing, but 2038, so not quite 20-year bonds.
Okay.
but-
This is not the first time we've done this, is it?
No, it is not.
Yeah, so it's
Yep.
matter of fact, is it referred to as the sixth supplemental that we've done at this
Yeah.
point? Okay.
Every time interest rates go, things like that happen.
Angela, even though we're only a conduit, does this have any impact on our bond rating?
Not on our bond rating. It does impact us in that we can only issue $10 million of tax exempt bonds every year. So this will limit the amount that we can do tax exempt for the rest of the year when we go to refinance. So we'll have to consider that.
But the city's, there's no liability for the city in
Right.
repayment.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions of staff or entertain a motion?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second?
Point of order, should we not see if there's someone who wants to speak?
Oh, true.
Absolutely.
First.
I apologize. I'm out of order there. Anybody who wants to speak to this, it is a public hearing. And while the hearing is still open, is there anybody who wants to speak to the bond issue? That's usually the answer, but I shouldn't suppose that, so.
I know.
Thanks, Steve.
Neither should I.
Thanks so much. Again, I think there was a motion
There
and a
was.
second.
Yeah.
So please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. All right, and then, is there another motion?
I move to approve an ordinance authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $4,555,000 healthcare facilities refunding revenue bonds, that is Wesley Towers, Inc., Series 2019, and authorize the mayor to sign the ordinance and all related documents.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Linda, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6B, public hearing to consider structures to be unsafe and dangerous.
Motion to open the hearing.
I would move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Late additions. Oh, is it? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate that. Morning, Trent.
Good morning, Council. Trent Maxwell, building official for the City of Hutchinson. So before where we came from on our demolition, back on September 3rd, Council set a date for the hearing. We were required to publish that within 30 days 2 times, which we did. The date affixed was October 15th, so that is why we're here. Before you, I've got some photos to show of each property. There are 2 properties that we had initially on our first resolution, and that is 1701 East 2nd and 4 Woodson Plaza. Those property owners came in, signed a release for us to abate the issue. So I do have 2 photos to start off just to show that they were on the list, but they're no longer in consideration. So with that, I'll start going through these photos, and then we'll talk more about the details. So again, these are the first 2 that signed release, so they're not, we don't need to discuss them. And this is the first one of the remaining properties that were up for discussion for condemnation and demolition. As you can see, I've got a little bit of note of some of the history. We've got a board up that the city performed. On this property, there's 3 different groups of structures. They're all under one parcel, so not to confuse you, but you will see different addresses, but it's all under one address, one main address. There was a fire on the property you see here with the photo. That's 17 North Maple. And we've had rental complaints in the past, which a couple of the properties, structures on this property were deemed uninhabitable.
Completely sidebar to this, but do we know the genesis of the fire that happened on 613?
I do not.
Okay,
know.
I can find that out. Thank you. Sorry.
I think it was actually vacant, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Or supposed to be vacant.
Okay.
This is the other property, second structure on there, 227 East First. Also, this was a rental. And then this is the third structure on the property. Each one of these has their own set of problems. Like I said, two of them, I believe the two-story, and the one that we had the fire, we actually had rental inspections on. Long history of violations and complaints on it. They've been left in disrepair. We have not had any communication with the property owner. Believe they had a property management too that was involved, and I don't know if they're here today, but they can speak on their behalf.
So all three of the structures you're presenting for demolition, not
Correct.
just the one that had the fire?
That's
Okay.
right. And we'll go through these, and then as we've done in the past, we can go back, start at the beginning, and you guys can discuss it from there. And then if you want the property owner to come up, or if you have a different approach.
Definitely.
Okay. This is the next parcel, 516 East 2nd. So we've done some mowing for them. They haven't had utilities since 2015. We also did a board up, and the unpaid taxes since also 2015. This property we've had a lot of complaints on. We've demolished, I think, a couple other houses in the same, within the same couple blocks on 2nd. Going through, figuring our list, this one finally came on our list this year, but it's got a history of complaints from the neighbors up there. This is an old storm cellar that's just sitting there. 840 East 4th. This is the old Beepster's Liquor. It's Severance and 4th. And I have had a lot of communication with the property owner, and she is here today to explain to you her plan. And you have before you her proposal. And some of the issues we had with this, it had several roof openings, a lot of pigeons inside, a lot of water coming inside the building. Some of the windows had been broken out. It was a major blight, and we knew it was some extensive cost to repair. And you'll see that she's, I think, got some good estimates and a plan to rehab this structure. And I think, so this is, when we go through and we start sending notices out, some of the property owners will want to come in and get permits, not knowing if they can execute what their plan is, their time frame. I don't feel comfortable issuing permits and allowing them to invest even a small amount of money that they may not be able to get back if the end result is it's condemned and demolished. She's made some effort on her own just to clean up that parking lot and around the building. So you see the first owner, or the previous owner, put this planning box around, which has created some water issues on that wall. The first thing she did is she hired someone to go and remove that area. So it's back open, back to the sidewalk. And then the planter boxes, we've always had complaints on tall grass or basically weeds growing up. She's cleaned up the whole parking lot, killed the weeds, and has started to, if I've got these photos, okay, nope. Anyway, she started to clean out the rock beds there. So she's making improvements, and we'll see what where it goes from there. Next property is the old Bernard's Restaurant, 2100 South Bone Break. Taxes are unpaid for 2017 and 18. I have had a lot of discussion with the property owner. This is similar to the 225 or 227 East First property. We have two properties, two separate parcels, one address. 2100 South Bone Break encompasses a large area with two parcels. One of it being the old restaurant, which is a commercial structure. And the next photos that I'm going to show you is a residential structure with some storage buildings on the outside.
This is the restaurant that we're looking at
This is the
now.
restaurant that we're looking at now. Yep. And she also submitted her and her son for the commercial structure and for the home time frame and a plan for you. after the first communication I had, they threw some metal and wood up there to, I think, help with the rain situation or the water issues. Since then, they've probably, and she can speak more clearly of this, probably have most of the restaurant cleared out so they can go in and assess and start making those repairs. This is the back side of the restaurant. And this is the front side looking from Bone Break to the residential structure. On the left side is what was an old home. So a lot of this, of what you're looking now, has changed. Some of the RVs and stuff I think are being hauled off. This was a photo from a couple days ago, and then I've got, let's see here. This one shows it. I went by there yesterday at about 3:30, and they've got a dumpster full. The structure you see to the very back, if you can tell, just to the right of the RV, is gone. They had another structure that also was in very poor condition beside the RV, behind it, and it is down too. They've hauled off several dumpsters. She can elaborate more on what they've done to clean it up. They came in, or her son did, to get a roof permit. I declined to issue that roof permit for the house until after this meeting to see what the direction was going to be. In the meantime, I told them no matter what happens, whether you save the structure or not, there's a lot of issues with the property itself, a lot of salvage type items just in this big lot. And so they've done a lot of work trying to clean that up. That's just a close-up of the roof. They do know, I visited with them yesterday. It's an old, there's 2 layers on there. There's a wood shake shingle below it. It will have to be ripped off and redecked, and he's aware of that, and I believe he has all the materials for that. 207 East E, we cited the roof for a property maintenance violation back in 2014. Have not had anything change in all those years, and unpaid taxes for 2017 and 18. And this is looking from the street. 624 East Avenue E. Also, we've boarded it up this year. We've had some mowing and abatement and unpaid taxes since 16. I have just a couple photos of this one due to the location of the property. To the west of this, we demolished a property about 3 years ago. It was the family members of this house, and since then they vacated this and basically abandoned the house. We've had no communication at all from the owners. 600 South Elm, this is the old church. We've trimmed the bushes many times for sight triangle issues for the traffic. We've boarded it up multiple times due to vagrants or people breaking in. And the taxes, just as of the second half of 2017, have been unpaid. There is someone that has made contact with the owner. We've tried through letters. I found a relative of the owner, reached out to her. She was going to let me know if she knew anything about where the owner was. The gentleman that reached out to me last Friday, and then I spoke to him yesterday, said that the owner is not coming back to Hutchinson, will stay in California. And there's a couple personal belongings that he wants this gentleman to get for him that he hid in the house. So I don't think he's contesting this and has any interest in the structure anymore. If you've been by there, other than just the overgrowth and people breaking in and ransacking or scrapping what they want out of it, the tower or the steeple of the structure is open. There's been rain for many, many years going in there in that area. And if you walk up the front main entrance of the old church, the whole floor is gone, the ceiling's gone, and it's just a mess. 204 East F, 2-story structure. The siding throughout has been in horrible condition. The back portion of the roof as well, but the back portion of the roof actually has holes on this lean-to portion coming back. I did speak to a son or grandson of the owner. There are some personal items that they want to get out of the house. I don't know if they're here to speak on rehabbing it. I gave them their options when he came and spoke to me, so they might be here with something to discuss. That's just a close-up of one of the holes on the back. 1301 South Maple, we abated it. It had a lot of stuff on the outside. Abated it in 18, we boarded it up in 19, we've mowed it, and no taxes have been paid since 2014. I've been in this with a relative of the homeowner. It is in horrible condition. Some work had been started, and everything that the new work that was done was not done right to begin with, so it all have to be ripped out. And I have not had any communication with the owner, just that relative. Another photo of the same house. 1600 North Prairie. I have spoke to the owner and the owner's son, and I know the owner's son is here to talk about their plan that is also presented to you. We've had violations all the way back since 2009. There was a fire. I don't know the date of the fire. And then the taxes have not been paid since 2014. They have done some work on the outside since my original photos. This is just showing the back of the house. There's a little unpaved alley beside it. And these are my, like I said, my original photos, and I'll get to. I went by there last week, took some photos to show just what they've done with the yard. They've cleared out a lot of the trees and bushes, covered the truck, which I believe the truck does run. And then this garage, these two windows have been filled in. If they are approved to work on the property, we'll have some, they filled them in with plywood where they're going to go back to original siding material or a window of some sort, whether it's plexiglass. So some of the things you see, if you do give them extensions, we'll make sure that they're repaired properly. And that is it for this property. This is 413 West Sherman. The taxes unpaid since 18. Owners are deceased. Water was shut off in March of 2018. This is adjacent to, I believe, the son of the deceased owners. We've sent out multiple violation letters. We haven't had any response. It's not an open communication type situation. So I'm not sure what their plan is. I don't know if there's a process that they're working trying to get the deed and ownership in their name. But the repairs that they made, they started some siding. Everything they did on the siding is incorrect.
Were permits pulled for some of this work? I saw it looked like maybe some
No,
window
the work
siding.
was started due to a violation, but no permits have been pulled. I think some early discussion with the first violation with our code enforcement inspector had happened. Nothing since we've sent out letters or anything like that for demolition, and nothing on the continual progress, if you will, for repairing to meet the violation. So
Was there a fire here?
I believe there was. I don't have the history of when the fire happened, so I didn't feel comfortable putting it in there. Okay, so that is our list. If you do want to go back and visit on the very first one and go through any questions you have for me on it.
And if I can ask you to be at the ready so that if you could advance the slides as we visit with the individuals, that would be great.
Absolutely. Okay.
So again, the first two are without incident. They've signed. Those will be put on the demo list. And
Yes, those will go up for bid. We've got a group unassociated with this that we will have a bid on. So we'll probably include those in that same packet.
okay. I guess at this point, I would ask those that, as you see a property that is particular to yourself, if you're in the audience, feel free to come on up so that we can maybe have some discussions about where you sit, what your intentions are, and go from there. The first one up is 225 East 1st Street. Somebody here to represent that property? Seeing none. Oh, and excuse me, this is the multiple property, correct?
Yeah.
Multiple
Three
structures. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
The next one up is 516 East 2nd. Is there anybody here to represent that property? Seeing none. This one I did hear somebody was in the audience for 840 East 4th.
Yes.
And if you'd be so kind to give your name and then let us know what your intentions are.
Okay, I've got kind of a cold, so I'm not
Oh, sorry to
able
hear
to
that.
talk very well, but I think I've owned this for maybe excuse me, maybe 6 years.
Could you give
And
us your
I'm-
name, ma'am?
I'm sorry, Pam Casanova. Carithers is my maiden name. I own Carithers Liquor on East 4th down the street from here. I bought that building originally because it went on auction and someone else was going to put another liquor store in it, and I couldn't allow that to happen. So I bought it, and I'm very embarrassed to say that I've let it go. I'm very ashamed of that, and I don't normally do that. But at this point, I've got thoughts of moving my store down there. I'm not sure about that yet, but in the meantime, I want to fix it up to be habitable for whatever business could go in there. So I have, like he said, I did have someone come and do the parking lot. In fact, it looks a lot better now than even that. Anything that's green and living is gone, and I want to keep it that way. So we're doing black, thick plastic under rocks and in the island areas where there were weeds. I've got bids on the roof. I do have one that I'm happy with, and he can start soon, but I want to make sure that this is going to work out with you guys first. I have a bid for the windows that are broken out. I have an electrician, Stewart Electric, is going to go in whenever we can and work with getting the electricity turned back on so that we can do the cleanup on the inside, because unfortunately there are a lot of deceased pigeons on the inside. That has been closed up, by the way. I had the soffit fixed so that they can't get in anymore. What else have I that's all I've got bids on so far, but I do want to get this rehabbed, and I have had 2 contractors go over there, and both said that it was definitely worth saving. It's not falling apart or anything like that, just the roof is in very bad shape. Those Mansfords, I guess they're called, down the side, the wood behind that is rotted, so those have to come off, so I want a whole new roof anyway. So
Well, thank you. This is a very detailed plan. It's accompanied by cost estimates. We like to see that.
Okay.
You're obviously aware of the overall expense, and
Right.
you're financially prepared, or
Yes,
perfect.
I am.
Okay. Any questions?
So you're asking for an extension, and if so, about how much time are you asking for?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the guy that can do the roof, I think, can do it within the next couple of months. It probably less than that if needed to be, but and I think that's the first thing that has to happen is the roof.
Is the roof?
Yeah, and then after that, and then cleaning up the inside, of course, too. I'm almost afraid that that's what's wrong with me, because I was in there with all that pigeon stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I don't know, but anyway, the roof is the first thing, and then the cleanup on the inside, and then the windows probably be after that.
Yeah.
And
Should
I-
you not choose to move your liquor store, what would your plans for the building be long-term?
Well, at that point, I guess I would think of leasing it to somebody. I mean, I want to make it look very nice. It's
Okay.
not going to look anything like this.
Sure.
So, I think maybe I might even have to do parking lot work, concrete, so that's going to, I don't know how long that takes, or if it can be done in the winter, I don't know. So, I'm not sure
Trent,
the answer.
The concrete, the parking lot, that is not necessarily, again, aesthetically, and you want to make sure it's good for yourself or for
Right.
that's not something that would be required.
No, I think that could be, we could, if she gets the other items fixed, we could even remove it from this list.
Right.
And deal with the parking or if there's damaged concrete in the parking lot
Sure.
at a later time.
What are the items that need to be addressed from your perspective? The roof, the windows?
The roof, the windows, the inside, like she mentioned, it's pretty bad. And my understanding is probably going to be a gut on the inside, but there are a couple walk-in coolers she's going to save, so I think the rest of it she'll probably just create her own new space, and that will solve any concerns I have with the existing moisture issues in the walls and ceiling material.
Do you have a confidence level with this plan that she's presented?
I do, because she's using licensed contractors, and she's been very open and upfront with me on it. So at this point, yeah,
Sure.
I feel comfortable with her plan and who she's using.
Wonderful.
You have committed yourself to wanting to invest $40,000 to $50,000 in the building?
Yeah, I have. I've already got over 90,000 in it from buying it
Do you?
and then paying taxes all these years.
Sure,
So,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I will comment. I tend to drive by that intersection frequently, and even just the cleanup in the parking lot and the street side plantings and whatnot. Granted, there are still boarded up windows, but it certainly has improved the appearance.
Thank
Just
you.
from a quick drive-by, and I'm glad to see that.
I've had some phone calls. I heard you. Just wanted to let you know that it's looking better. What are you going to do? Somebody said, are we going to put a Popeye's fried chicken in there?
People have ideas.
That'd be great.
Well, the question has been asked, and I'll re-ask it, is what amount of time, what do you think is reasonable from your perspective, and maybe also from ours then, in terms of if we're going to consider an extension?
Council, allow me to interrupt. You're not to that point yet,
Okay.
We're not.
because if you look at the resolution you're going to adopt, it talks about the owners of such structures are hereby given 30-day notice from the date of publication of this resolution.
Okay.
So you're not to an extension of time yet.
Okay.
Okay.
And we
Now,
won't be,
if
we won't
you
be
want to
there
have a
today.
general idea of when the owners, for their project, if you want to have that general idea, that's fine. Today, you'll choose whether or not to adopt that resolution, and then 30 days from now, you'll be looking at extensions.
Okay.
Well, and the
Thank you.
construction plan that she put forth did list January 1st as completion date.
Does it?
Yes, there at the end.
Any other
Okay.
question of the
Gotcha.
owner while we have her up here?
Well, that being said, I'll still stay from my perspective. I'm certainly very open to giving you an opportunity, I guess, in another 30 days when we have that action to take place.
Okay.
And my guess is there's probably agreement with the rest of the council too to offer that, but I'd leave that to them to make the comment. 'Cause I'd like to see for you to feel comfortable in proceeding rather than waiting 30 days and doing nothing more type of thing, so.
Well, it's a
That-
fairly busy intersection, and I would hate to have a vacant lot there, actually. So I'm happy to hear that you have plans to
Yeah.
Thank you for
bring
putting
that into
together a
compliance.
thorough
Yeah.
plan.
There's a
Thank you.
vote of confidence
There you go.
Okay.
we have in you.
So I didn't want to spend any more. I've spent already quite a bit on the park, the outside stuff, but I wanted to not spend any more money until I knew that I wasn't going to be demolished. So
Yeah.
am I safe now to say that?
From my perspective, yes.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Very fine.
Thank
Thank
you.
you again.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
That's yours, right?
Trying to feel advance it. This is 2100 South Bone Break. Welcome. And if you mind giving your name and your address, or well, maybe we have the address.
My name is Susie Bernard, and I own and operate Bernard's Catering and Concessions from the Kansas State Fairgrounds. Our family has been in the community over 125 years. Unfortunately, our parents passed away, my sister died, and all of my staff except for 2. So,
You're a hard person to work for.
but we're resilient.
There you go. I like that.
All right.
We're not going to quit. As Trent told you, I have been in conversation with him on several occasions. Unfortunately, we do regret, and I'm sorry that it's come to look like this. So we've came up with a plan. If you look at the front, we've talked to several contractors to take down the north end, not the north end, the south end, and hold on to the north end. For catering, I cannot store all my equipment or concessions at the Kansas State Fairgrounds. I'm in the food court. We've been there 50 years and been in business 69. But it needs to be fixed, so I'm working with Groover Construction. We want my storage area, which is on the north end, to be box white, no frill. If I do an event for 600 people, I need a place to store plates, water goblets, tents, concession equipment. So we've cleaned up the property. like Trent said, I have a semi there emptying out the building with the prospect for the remodel. So, basic effective. Sam Bernard, along with Bernard's brothers, built this building. So, these windows all around will come down, and the actual part of the building will start where the arch is, because it's in better repair. It will not cost as much. So down at the green end, that's where Bernard's will be. So we will hold on to the property and restore it. We keep it mowed, but it needs to be fixed. So you asked what happened. My son hit a train and tragically lived. My husband has had numerous strokes and heart attacks. My sister, I gave up in 12 to 14 till her death because she had hypocalcemia. It's a very serious disease of cancer that attacks the bones, and you come inoperative to speak. So I moved to Wichita and was her caregiver until her death. She ran the business and I ran the food inn. We love this community. I want to stay. We have a plan. It will work.
A question, if I might. Again, thank you for submitting a plan. I see a price tag on there of $48,000. Are you prepared for that kind of investment?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Long term.
Okay. And then I guess I would go back to Trent as well and say, does this plan address the issues, if we meet them, to fix what the problems are?
I think as far as I know, from what my discussions with her is, yes. I think there may be some unknown, and the contractors expressed that to her. But the overall end goal, if as described to me, is a white box. That means the roofing's done, the siding, the whole exterior's done. The inside is whatever electrical lighting and outlet she needs, and then sheetrock. And that's it. Nothing to
frills.
facilitate any kind of restaurant, any other business at this time. In the future, she may do something different, but at this time, we're looking at a very minimal building. So,
As I recall, there was also the issues just of the exterior and storage of RVs and
That's from next
another
door.
another building or two that.
correct. That is so. There are two separate parcels under the same address. Both parcels are for consideration today, and that's a separate plan, but you're correct. So the proposal in front of you, the multi-page one, is for the commercial structure and the white box, if you will, of the old restaurant. The second is a single-page proposal that was in your packet, and then I handed it to you first thing. That is for the residential home. There is a metal building, storage building that they want to save as well. And then the rest of it is like the trailers or the RVs. A lot of that stuff they've been cleaning up. They will need to get it cleaned up before it's complete. And then we'll verify that on the residential side that the home is livable, in good condition, and that the big, large metal storage building is safe and secure as well.
Susie, what's your general time frame to accomplish all this?
I'm looking at probably 10 or 11 months on the restaurant with working with Groover Construction.
Okay.
And also the winter months. But the thing I feel like is most important is the physical aspect. In other words, get that roof taken off, get it done. I want the community to be able to drive by and go, Bernard's are making changes. That's looking good. We're an asset to the community. So given with the winter months and what Groover Construction said, 11 the very most, you know. So we'll have to go in there, take the roofing off, see what we're up against, but we know that the north end is solid, so much more than the south end. But I wanted to take a moment and go back to this picture. That looks nothing like that now, as far as the house.
Okay.
Trent was just out there yesterday. All those, I need you to go to the house. All that's gone.
Oh,
Gotcha.
Does it look like that now, Trent?
No, so there's still some RVs on the property, but these RVs that are here now are gone. They've got a big dumpster in the yard. And then the structure, which you can't see from this photo, there's 2 sheds that already had failures or major issues. They're both down, and I know one was 90% cleaned up when I went there yesterday at 3. I'm not sure if they were able to get the dumpsters back in time to get the rest of the debris put in the dumpsters.
So that's all clean, cleared up. If someone drove by, it's 99% visibly and better. And on that, we want to put on a new roof and repair the siding, but the house is solid and livable. And then in the future, maintain the yard and the area being clean and clear.
Well, Susie, excuse me for asking, but in your catering business, do you still offer Toulette's potatoes?
That's my
I'm
mom.
guessing the answer is yes.
Yes.
That's your mother,
We still
Toulette.
make Toulette's cheesy
Yes.
potatoes.
Very good.
All right.
But again, for wanting and needing the building, I cannot store everything at the fairgrounds. We're in Gate 6 in the food court.
I think your Toulette's just got you something there.
Push Tim over the edge, yeah.
Pushed it over the edge.
I think I would offer you the same encouragement we did with the last property. Continue to work with your contractor to get some hard dates and figures so that you're not surprised in 30 days if, originally we thought it was going to be in the neighborhood of this 48,000 and it turns out it's going to be a great deal more or whatever.
And we've taken that under consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think with the progress that you've made with the cleanup, that shows good effort and things like that. We can't make promises today, but I would kind of offer the same thing we might have offered slightly on the last one. Our inclination would probably be to work with an individual who's showing progress.
Okay, so where am I at now so I can tell my family?
You're in the same place you were just a moment ago, and I know this is a difficult place where we're kind of in limbo. Because of the procedure and the way it is, you have to stay upon the list. But I think historically you've found that this council and others have been generous in working with individuals that show progress. So keep working with your contractor, finalize numbers so you know where you're at, no surprises. And come back and see us in 30 days, and we'll, at that point, is that correct, Paul?
That's correct.
At that time, we'll be able to offer an extension if it's warranted at that time. Our
Thank you for
inclination
listening.
historically is to do so with folks that are working on it.
And Susie, I do want to say that I have complete faith in you, and
Thank you.
my heart just goes out to you for all the tragedy you've had to endure. And I know grief can be so debilitating, and this was the least of your priorities. Your priorities were in the right place. And Bernard's is an institution in this community. Everybody recognizes it. Everybody's had the black eyed peas and the potatoes. So I'm so thrilled to see you're coming back.
Thank
So,
you. I want to.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, Susie, I did want to add one thing. As the mayor stated, I'm certainly inclined and more than inclined to be supportive. I probably won't be in favor of a 10 or 11 month extension right off the get-go. My guess is we'll go
And,
with some.
and for me, that's just guesswork. I'm not a contractor.
Yeah, I understand. But I just wanted
And
to.
it didn't get there overnight.
Right. And you won't get the other direction overnight either. We understand that. But my guess is we'll probably do some incrementals and have you coming back and assuring us and also hearing reports from Trent and his staff that progress is being made. So I just wanted to make that comment again from my perspective so that you're not surprised in 30 days that we don't give you a whole 10 or 11 months right up front. It might be
Right.
a 90-day or
And that's
something.
what
other.
he stated. We have
Right.
to wait and see.
And it's not uncommon, if your contractor is available, Mr. Gruber could attend as well, and maybe he could offer a time frame. Because you're right, we're not in the construction business, and we don't know what's on his plate. But if he can offer us that, the difference between what you're doing and some properties we've seen in the past is you are going through a contract, or your intentions are to do so. That lends a certain amount of credibility. Things happen when you try and do it yourself. Not that people aren't capable of doing so, but things come up on occasion where a contractor will stay on task and do so. So, once again, thank you for your presentation.
So I need to come back in 30 days, show
Yes.
progress.
Trent will guide you through the process as we
Work
go.
with Trent.
Yeah,
Say what?
Work with Trent.
All right.
very good.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
again.
you.
You'll be good.
Too many papers up there. Trent Appeal, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so now we have 207 East E Avenue. Is there anybody here to represent that property? Seeing none. Next, 624 East Avenue E. And again, 600 South Elm. I think we cleared that up. The individuals in California staying in California. Okay. Unless there was representation, I don't want to be presumptuous. Seeing none. 204 East F Avenue. Here we go. Good morning. If you'll state your name and let us know where you're at.
Barbara Crow. I'm the owner at 204.
Very good. You obviously know why you're here, and,
Yes, I
if
do.
I might ask, what's your thoughts on the process and what's your intentions with the property?
It's a good house. It's just ugly. With the siding and the roof gone bad at the same time.
Do you reside there yourself, or is it?
No, I don't.
It's a rental or an investment property. If you will?
I had my nephew staying there, and that didn't help.
Did not help. Okay, I'm
No,
sorry to hear that.
but I think a roof, and it's a 4-bedroom. How can you tear down a 4-bedroom?
Did you? I'm not seeing it, but Trent? Was there a proposal? Or
No, I
submittal?
didn't come and talk to Trent.
Okay.
I didn't make it. My nephew came in.
Okay. Do you think you can put together a proposal, and do you think you have the?
Yeah, I deal with a siding company, and they usually help me with my stuff. I think maybe if a roof on there, and if no more, if I can't afford it, then sell it to somebody that can.
Okay, and that is always an option to do so. I know we've had some properties in the past where individuals were able to sell the property, and others then did whatever they wanted to do to it. The procedure again suggests that you would stay on the list. The property would stay on the list. I would encourage you to maybe seek out some your siding guy. Your
I
roofing
plan
person.
to. He's busy, and I didn't get a hold to him.
Sure. And get some hard numbers, because sometimes it's very eye-opening as to what the actual expense is to do that. Either direction. You might be more surprisingly affordable than you might give it credit, or it could go the other direction as well.
Okay.
And use this time, this 30 days, if you will, to soul search also. If you can make those repairs happen. I might also suggest there are some other avenues, different groups, churches, organizations, grants, and things like that you might seek as well. For opportunities to help with some of the expenses and things like that.
Okay.
Okay, the key is to sit down with Trent, make a plan,
There you go.
talk to your contractor, come back in 30 days, and we'll see if you've made enough progress to warrant a further extension. So
Okay.
you got to talk to Trent.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay?
All right.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
All
ma'am.
right, Trent.
Trent, would you remind us, what is it, roof and siding on this structure?
Yeah, that was
Or
the
is there
main.
more?
No, we've had complaints on it. The roof, the structure, so the back of, and I don't know the
Well, that's
condition
right,
of
the
the
back had the
lean-to.
holes
It's
in the,
only the back.
So if she replaced all the roof, replaced all the siding, any rotted wood on the exterior, and then again, I don't know if that lean-to portion would just be completely demolished or if it's savable. I don't know what the inside of that looks like, but we've had water going in there.
but if you
so.
talk with Trent, you'll have that
Inside is
conversation.
okay except for the back.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Talk to Trent.
Thank you again. Appreciate it. Next one, if you would, please. Next one up is 1301 South Maple. Anyone here to represent that property? Seeing none. Next. 1600 North Prairie.
Yeah.
And if you'll announce, say your names and.
My
let us
name's
know.
Kevin Dilly. This is my son Dallas Dilly.
Dallas.
The property's mine. I apologize to the city for letting weeds and all that get overgrown. We did go through and clean that up. I had a fire, I would say 2 years ago, maybe coming on 3. It was right at Christmas time. I walked away from the place for a year, letting it try to air out. As far as structural damage, there wasn't any. It was 90% smoke.
Did you reside in it when the fire occurred? Yes?
I resided in it when I was at work when the fire happened.
Electrical or?
It was electric blanket. I had some cats, and they stepped on the cord and turned it on. And
Gotcha.
it was all wrapped around and overheated.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Basically, yeah, like I said, it was smoke damage at the time. Me and my son decided, which he don't live with me at the time. He was already out of the house. But we decided just to go through it, replace everything. We tore lath and plaster out. Decided, you know, they had the old cloth wire in it. I'm going to replace the wiring. That's where we're at now. I have had a building permit. I wasn't aware I was on a time frame. I had left the windows boarded up so nobody could see in there, because I leave tools and stuff in there, so I didn't want people breaking a window in. Going through that. Myself and him are doing the work. I've done it in years past. Now I'm a salt miner. I work out at Hutch Salt. He works at Lion Salt. So we put in a lot of hours there. So whenever we catch up, we go over there. Of course, when we got the notice, can't go in there. What I did was the yard. Since then, I've talked to Trent. I took him in, kind of showed him what we have done. I've got pictures if you all would like to see.
If you don't mind,
them.
bring them up. We're more than happy to look at them. Thank you.
Of what we started with and what we've done.
I noticed here that the taxes have been unpaid since 2014. Have you brought those current?
No, but I plan on it this year. I'm trying to get them all done, all caught up this year.
Okay, so how many years of taxes would bring it current then? Because this lists 5 years of unpaid taxes.
I didn't think I was 5 years behind, because I know I paid taxes like 2 years ago.
Yeah, this says 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Okay, well, I apologize for that.
That would
thought
be
it-
really important to make
Okay.
sure that the taxes are
Get
current.
my taxes caught
I'm
up.
in your
surprised
overall
it hasn't
plan.
been taken to tax sale
Yeah, I'm
already. 'cause
surprised it
that
hadn't been
far
taken
back.
to tax sale if it's that much in
Well,
arrears.
yeah,
Here's the frame up.
no, that's a totally different thing.
Yeah, that'll be important,
Okay.
very important.
Okay, well, I'll go down today and find out where
Yeah,
I'm
what
at
your
on
status
them
is on the taxes.
and try to get them brought up to speed.
Trent, on the work that's been done inside, it looks like there's been quite a bit done. What's your comfort level for that work bringing the inside up to code?
Well, so the walkthrough I did was just 10, 15 minutes one day with them. I never had some of my concerns, which I explained to them on the framing that has been done. I want to make sure that the 2x4s have the correct span. That was the first time I think any of us from inspection had been in there, so we would go through a lot more thoroughly. There's some headers that need to be installed. It's an old framed house, and so the old framing doesn't meet some of the structural requirements we have today. So there will have to be changes done. I did notice when I did a walkthrough, they had accumulated several 2x4s, 2x6s, maybe 8s, and so forth on the floor and up on a rafter section. My only concern with the whole project is time frame. Doesn't look that bad to me until you get to the siding, November 2020, which is just over a year from now. And that's, we get complaints for neighbors. That's part of what properties, why they come on the list, is to help eliminate the blight and the issues from neighbors, complaining all the time. So.
The siding was a typo. I'm sorry, I apologize. I figured to have it done by this year. Along with the windows, I thought get the outside.
November of 19, maybe, is what you're saying?
Of this year, yes.
Okay.
The siding's not bad, just
It's
right above
just-
where that front window is.
Yeah.
The rest of the house, the siding's not beat up. There might be a couple little holes.
The fire
It's
was up.
presentable besides the windows. We left them boarded up because we have generators, tools. We don't need kids trashing the place.
Right.
The fire was in this section of the house, right here on this corner.
Gotcha.
One of the things we talked about, on the siding that was installed on the back side, it was flashed or installed improperly. And they can probably fix that when they get their roofing estimate or contractor to help rebuild a portion of it to prevent water from intruding into the house. And the roof is a big aspect of it, but they're waiting, so we don't have a date on it. So with the 19 of the siding, if they keep to it, they did express that they work a lot. But as you guys are aware, you know, we want to see that progress. And so as long as they're committed to making sure that we are having progress happen, we get the roofing estimate and licensed contractor doing the work, and I think they could probably make a go of it.
Trent, remind me, when individuals such as themselves are in this position where you've got to be nervous about how much capital you invest in the property and you're still on the list, we understand that, and that's the same thing that was expressed by others. You're not willing to give her permits. Does that limit the amount of work or the type and scope of work that they can do during this 30-day window?
The 30 days, at that point, I'm probably fine issuing it. Now they know where they stand,
Gotcha.
what they're committing to, and whether or not the feeling for them is that you're going to be willing to work with them on any extensions.
Okay.
Before this date, I'm not comfortable, because if they spend a little bit of money on something, they might not, like some of the 48,000, Pam, you know, hers is, you know, who knows, 40,000 too or more.
Okay.
They need to understand that, and I don't want them to even waste $5,000 and find that the end result, when they get the roofing estimate back, is more than they want to invest in it, or when they add up everything else. So I wait till we have this meeting before I issue any permits. And now they know, and they've been, you know, if you will, put on point to make the decisions. And if they're comfortable moving forward with permits, and then the end result, it still comes down, I've done everything I could to educate them on it.
Then I would offer, please.
My deal, first, I would like to do the windows, get the windows done, the siding around here. That way it looks more presentable. I'll probably put a new front door on.
We did put a new front window.
We did get a new
It's
window
good.
in.
It's got a big paint window in it.
And the roof itself is not in disrepair necessarily. It is.
It don't leak or none of that.
Yeah, it don't leak. It's got one of the
edge.
edging, I don't know if I got a picture of that. One, on the back side of the house, I had a tree. No, might be on our
Right on the other side,
It's
but-
on the other side, but there's a piece on the edge that a tree had came down and knocked loose. Need to put a facer board up there.
Okay.
And
You know, obviously, your best bet is to keep the water intrusion, the elements out, and then so the windows, the siding, the roof
Yes.
are the key
it
elements.
does not leak at all right now. It never has. I've lived there 23 years.
Okay. Well, again, and Nancy said it, and I'll reiterate: work with Trent, get a plan put together, if you will. You know where you stand with the permit process now. If you, it would show good faith if we could see more progress down the road as well.
Yes,
These
sir.
are historically the houses that and the individuals that we've worked with is where we can see marked progress, not just a token effort, but real marked progress.
Okay.
I go back to the taxes again. This is something because all this can be for naught if the county decides to put
Right,
on the
and
steps.
I understand that.
So
Yeah.
definitely want to get that.
And as he
square.
asked about the truck in back, the truck's an antique classic. It's also a specialty vehicle. It does run. I told him.
It's a tow truck.
It's a tow truck.
Okay.
It's an antique tow truck. I told him, I pull the battery out so nobody comes up and messes with it.
There you go.
Tries to
There's
get it
rules
back.
that go with that, and Trent knows what those are. So if you
And
are in alignment with what he says,
Yes.
you'll be fine.
The back garage windows, they weren't tarped up, they weren't plexiglass, those have been in there for 20 years.
Yeah.
All we did
The-
was paint them.
all I did was
It
paint
made a
down,
night and
made
day
them look,
difference.
look
Isn't
better.
it amazing?
The
It's
back-
been plywood since I've owned it.
The
Perfect,
back
perfect.
big door has been tarped up, just because it was old, rotted, came off track.
Eventually,
Very pain in the
I
butt.
plan on getting
Sure.
a door on there.
Very good. Well, we wish you well, and Steve.
Yeah,
what were you gonna say?
I guess a cautionary note, I'm certainly inclined to be supportive, but where we've run into issues has been with the folks who are doing all the work themselves. So I'm just saying, I mean, you're biting off a lot.
Yes, I understand.
I don't know if you guys
and
know, the salt season, we're both in the peak
Okay.
of our season.
But I just want to
so we're
caution,
6,
that's
7
where
days.
we've come to issue with folks in past years. So it is important that you have a good, reasonable time frame that you're looking at, and you make sure that rather than pipe dreaming, you know what
Right.
your work level is and your earnings level and your ability to do
And
that
I
work.
did have, you weren't aware of it, when I got my first permit, I did have inspectors come in there. I believe it was already, they had told us to demo the inside, then we could get the permits to do what we was gonna do. We didn't have a demo permit. I brought them in, some of your colleagues over there, and walked them through with what I was doing. I didn't realize I had a time frame at that time. I did let the permit expire. I apologize, but with work, I'm also, as long as mine rescue, I'm on the mine rescue team, so we travel at times too.
And
So-
these are the exact reasons that Steve emphasizes.
And I
where
I
with the
see what you're
contract.
saying, yes.
But again, you know the
We-
ground rules, and
Yeah.
and, I think I
We
see a
got it.
level of understanding.
Yes.
So keep up the progress, and we'll look to see from you in 30 days.
30
Go
days,
from there.
okay.
Thanks again
Thank
for
you.
coming down and presenting.
Hope that's easy.
I want to comment, I appreciate folks who are wanting to retain and rejuvenate property. I'd much rather retain those buildings than tear them down. So I'm really hopeful that all of those that have talked to us today are 100% successful, because I'd much rather keep a structure than demolish it.
The next item up, or property up, is 413 West Sherman. Anybody here to represent that property?
I jumped the gun, sorry.
You're good, you're good. Oh, was that your closing remark? Seeing none, next one, please. Or that is the last
That's
one.
it.
I'll take it
That's
now.
it, finally.
Now, one other thing, we have two motions. In history, the cash bond has been waived. It is part of the ordinance, that's why we keep putting it in this, but if you wish to waive it, that is a second motion. So,
First one, not to be turned by enforcement.
and then also to close the public hearing, so.
Well, first of all, I'd move to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and second, close the public hearing. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Iris de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. All right, and maybe just for my own clarification, the surety, the cash bond, that is purchased by the property owner?
It's yes, it is paid by the property owner in the estimated cost to demolish the property. And
Okay,
that's,
and, well, I guess I could vary depending on
And
the
it's
property,
it's
but-
been problematic in the past.
Has that been a standard
challenge.
procedure for us?
it's
That
been,
we
but
waived
it's
it.
always been
Go ahead.
for the past several years, it's been waived. And the same thing, a motion to not require the cash bond.
Not require the cash bond? I couldn't
Right.
remember.
Maybe we need to look at changing that ordinance.
Yeah, it's a 50-50 idea of, because you hear the heartburn if we were to require it, and then on the other side, there's some properties like last year that fell through, and we ended up having to go out for bid on some late properties that were given extensions, so, but.
What's
Trent,
the,
just to-
yeah, what's the consensus?
Well, let's deal
Just
with
to
the
make
first-
sure
let's deal with
on
the first motion.
some of the properties I marked off of our list, I just want to make sure that I got the ones that we had indicated.
Well, I think they
We're
all
all
need to,
gonna stay.
they all
Yeah.
need to
They're gonna all stay.
go
Okay.
Yep.
in this motion.
Yep.
And then in 30 days, we'd be looking at eliminating those
Okay.
that we don't, that we're willing to give up.
Yeah, 30 days is required by ordinance, so.
Okay, is there a motion?
So let's move to approve the resolution which condemns unsafe and dangerous structures within the city of Hutchinson located at 225 East First, 516 East Second, 840 East Fourth, 2100 South Bone Break, 207 East Avenue E, 624 East Avenue E, 600 South Elm, 204 East Avenue F, 1301 South Maple, 1600 North Prairie, and 413 West Sherman, and allow the property owners 30 days to repair or remove such structures and authorize the mayor to sign the resolution.
Second.
Got a couple seconds. It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Iris de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. The next motion?
Correct. The next motion is specifically on the cash bond, whether or not you want to require it.
I would move to waive the required cash bond to be provided by the property owner in an amount to be determined by the enforcing officer sufficient to cover costs of removal of the structure by the city.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Moved
Some
and seconded.
comment.
Please.
Trent, John, I'd sure appreciate bringing this back to us in the not distant future. This issue, do we want to continue having it part of the ordinance, the code?
Same.
And just have that discussion when we're not dealing with the issue of dealing and people that are wanting to do some work and make a decision that we think is the right way to go. And if we want to continue surety bonds, then we need to uphold that when we come to this point, or if we don't want to require them, then make that change. So I just asked for it to be brought back to us maybe in, I don't know, 60, 90 days, something like that.
And not to have the conversation this moment, but Paul, is that something that can be amended?
We actually follow the state statute. That's where that comes from.
Is that a
Yes.
state
Is that what
statute?
that is?
So
Waive.
we couldn't waive
Or
it?
change it.
Well, you do.
We waive it.
Yeah,
Well,
we
we
do.
do, yeah.
As I said.
Yeah, that's
But it,
absurd.
I mean, I think it's something that, as we go through these and experience these, we may want to go back to it, because we find, as Trent said, we get way down the road and then we end up paying the cost of demolition that we
There's
never
value
get
to
that
having
cost.
that
So there's
bond in
value.
place. And then the bonding company pays the damages.
The surety.
And then we're not even the debt collector. They go after the
Yeah.
individual to get it. So there is value to it.
But then you look at the ability of people who are in a position to try to fix up their properties to have that additional amount of money that they could be investing in their properties to fix it up.
At this
That's
point, I'm
my
not
concern.
suggesting we do or don't do
Proceed.
something. I'm just saying I'd like to have a discussion about it at a time where we're not dealing with specifically the issue of properties that we're moving forward on demolition and or talking with owners about not doing that, so.
I'll also offer this. I'll make some inquiries as to what the premium associated with a bond like that would cost. That would
That'd be helpful.
I think. So,
Yeah,
okay,
and
very good.
some history on how often we should have had one and we didn't.
And we chose not to.
So,
If there's been problems, which you said there was, John.
Yeah.
I'd like
Well,
to know
it's
what
just
those
been,
problems are.
as Jade mentioned, it's been a cost that's been
Yeah.
there. But,
Very good. I believe there was a motion and a second.
Yes, there was.
If you'll call the roll, please.
Deckent,
And the motion was to waive, correct?
Waive.
Yes.
Yes, to waiver.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Soldner.
yes,
Tyrus Carvalho.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Before we call the next item, I'm going to go ahead and call for a short break of 10 minutes. Let's actually just do it till 25 after.
Okay.
And then we'll return to the session and go there. But we thank you for your patience. But I think if you want everybody's full attention, a break might be in order. So thank you, and we'll re-adjourn in just about 10 minutes, 25 after. As it turns out. had all been made aware of, but I'd like to go ahead and read them again, the parameters that we set for this appeal. So if you'll indulge me that, just so we all are on the same page. Number one on the list was that the attorneys for both parties will have 30 minutes to orally argue their positions. Evidence will be limited to only those documents that are already part of the formal grievance arbitration record. A detailed index will be sent to both parties, but the evidence will be limited to A, arbitration hearing exhibits from both parties, B, arbitration transcripts, C, all post-hearing pleadings, D, post-hearing briefs from both parties, E, decision and award of arbitrator Jeffrey W. Jacobs, F, city manager's step 3 decision memo. City staff have been directed to provide the above documents to each council member and each attorney on or before October 8th. I can speak for the council. We received ours. 2, submission of position statements in advance of the hearing was not to be allowed. Additional records were not to be allowed. 4, cross-examination of witnesses was not to be allowed. 5, since this is an appeal filed by the union will make its presentation first. 6, once each side has made its presentation, only city council members will be permitted to ask questions of the attorneys and/or any witnesses that are present at the hearing. 7, comments from the general public will not be permitted. 8, at the conclusion of the hearing, the city council will render a decision or will set a date at a later time to render a decision. Is there anybody on the council that has any questions with regards to the way the parameters were set up?
Nope.
No.
Okay, and I'm sure everybody councils were provided with the same. With that being said, then, I suggest that we get into the appeal process. And I believe maybe that leads to yourself.
Thank you, sir. My name is Matt Huntsman. I'm the attorney for FOP Lodge 7 and the grievant John Suda. And I'm from the law firm Bucati, Aubrey, and Huntsman. As you mentioned, there are parameters that were set. This is being treated as an appeal hearing, and as such, I would ask that the council grant me 10 minutes of my 30 for rebuttal, if that would be okay with you guys.
I'll
Counsel?
defer to the mayor's.
Okay, is there any commentary on that? We had set the parameters.
I would be inclined to go with what the parameters were set forth,
Same
but I
here.
will defer to what else.
Anybody have a strong argument either direction?
Well, I can't address any of the comments made by Mr. Thomas if I don't get a chance to rebut.
If we have questions, I think we'll call upon you to clarify those for us, but I think we'd prefer to stay within the parameters.
Very well.
Thank you.
I will do my best to guess at what he is going to talk about. This case is currently at the final step of the contractual grievance procedure. The contract is exhibit number 1 in the notebook in front of you. Glad you guys all had a week to review all of this, and I hope memorized it. According to the contract, your decision today is final and binding. However, because you are serving as a quasi-judicial body, it is subject to judicial review. I don't want to dig into the evidence of this case at this time. We already did that at the arbitration hearing, and as you've already stated, Mr. Mayor, you're not accepting additional exhibits or anything like that. There's also not a opportunity for any witness statements or cross-examination today. So rather, I want to address this in just 3 parts. The first part will be the arbitrator's award. I'll dig into that a little bit with you. I'm then going to discuss the city manager's rejection of that award, which the FOP considers arbitrary and not supported by substantial evidence. And then lastly, I will touch on your duties as the city council under your statutes and the contract. Now, we went to an arbitration hearing before Jeffrey Jacobs. I don't have his resume in front of me, but Jeffrey Jacobs is a full-time arbitrator, and I say that knowing how difficult it was to find time to A, get the hearing on the calendar, and B, schedule phone conferences with him during the entire process. Mr. Jacobs makes his living analyzing collective bargaining agreements and memoranda of understanding. He has practiced or served as an arbitrator in both the public sector and the private sector. Now, Mr. Jacobs was selected by both parties. I called your city attorney, Mr. Brown. We went through a list of, I can't remember if it's 5 or 7 with you guys, but we went through a list of arbitrators. Jeffrey Jacobs was the one mutually selected, and both sides were responsible for paying equal portion of his bill after the case was done. Now, Arbitrator Jacobs scheduled a hearing with us. We spent a full day presenting testimony that was heard under oath. Officer Suda testified under oath. Tom Sanders testified under oath. Chief Hooper testified under oath. And Detective Lahan of the Hutchinson Police Department testified under oath. Mr. Jacobs had an opportunity to hear all of this testimony as well as cross-examination conducted both by myself and Mr. Brown. Under the contract, it is the duty of the arbitrator to find facts. That's his job. You'll find that on page 4 of Exhibit 1. If there isn't a joint statement of facts submitted by the parties, which why would there be if we're going to arbitration, then it's the arbitrator's job to do that, and the contract says he shall. He is the only person throughout this process who gets to hear testimony presented under oath. He is the only person who gets to make determinations on whether or not an exhibit is admitted into the record, and it is his job to give weight to that evidence. Now, the FOP is not here to argue against the arbitrator's award. It wasn't a generous award. The arbitrator found 2 of the 3 violations to be sustained. He found that Officer Suda violated policy when he deactivated his body camera on February 25th, 2018. The arbitrator also found that Officer Suda should have conducted field sobriety tests, the SFSTs, standardized field sobriety tests. Sorry, ma'am. However, the arbitrator did not find that Officer Suda lied to the investigator or to anyone else during this process. He acknowledged in his award, and I'm quoting from the award, which you'll find in Exhibit 48 of the notebook. He said that lying in an official interview regarding official duties is perhaps one of the most serious charges that can be levied against a law enforcement officer and cuts to the very core of their integrity and honesty and, frankly, their ability to do their jobs effectively. He understood just what was at stake when he reviewed the evidence. He understood the gravity of the situation prior to writing his award, and he included that statement in the award. After reviewing all of the evidence, and this includes the video evidence and audio recordings and everything that we had, after reviewing everything, the arbitrator determined that the city had not proven that Officer Suda had lied during the investigation to Mr. Doug Duckett, who did the investigation in this case. And when I say you reviewed the videos, it's important to note he saw everything. And he addressed many, if not all, of the videos in his award. In Exhibit 48, page 34, there was a discussion about an interview room video, which I'm sure you will be seeing today if you haven't already watched it. He determined, after reviewing the video, that this was actually a mitigating factor for Officer Suda. Officer Suda got back to the LEC, the Law Enforcement Center, I apologize, the LEC. He reviewed the call notes for the first time when he was back at the LEC, realized that there were multiple calls about an erratic driver, and he called a supervisor to ask what to do. He was concerned about what had happened. He wanted to make sure he was doing the right thing. And the arbitrator reviewed that video, and he determined that this was Officer Suda making sure that he was doing things right. And he was assured by his sergeant that he had conducted things correctly and that everything was going to be okay. The arbitrator also reviewed, albeit after the fact, there was some miscommunication between myself and the city regarding the existence of some videos from outside the LEC that day that showed the off-duty officer walking in to the LEC. Those videos were shot approximately 15 minutes after the traffic stop occurred. Those videos show the woman walking into the LEC in a straight line. The arbitrator reviewed those videos, and he considered those to be persuasive evidence that weighed in Officer Suda's favor, that he was telling the truth about what happened that day. that this off-duty officer wasn't drunk. There were issues that were going on, but there were no indications that she was driving drunk that day. Now, it should be noted that he reviewed all of the evidence, and that included the $30,000 investigative report that was prepared by Doug Duckett for the city. Mr. Duckett flew down here from Ohio, interviewed Officer Suda after he had worked a night shift, spent about 3 hours in the interview room, and he prepared a 42-page report. The arbitrator determined that because Mr. Duckett wasn't available for cross-examination, and because some of the statements in that report are just flat out wrong, that he was going to give it little to no weight. So the report itself was considered to essentially be worthless. Now, that is an important point that I will come back to later. The other point I want to raise about the arbitration hearing and the discipline itself is that the department didn't conduct a clean sweep of all the individuals who were involved that day. At the moment, Lieutenant Robert Rao is still employed by the Hutchinson Police Department. Lieutenant Rao prepared a report the same day. He interviewed the off-duty officer, concluded that she was not intoxicated, but rather suffering from mental distress. He submitted this report to the department. Mr. Duckett's report suggests that this is still Lieutenant Rao's position, that she wasn't drunk that day. However, he didn't testify at the hearing, so I haven't ever been able to cross-examine him about what happened. But nevertheless, the department continues to employ Lieutenant Rao, and it's my understanding that he did not receive any discipline regarding his involvement in this matter. And he is the individual who interviewed the off-duty officer and chose to release her. Now, I want to talk just briefly about Officer Suda. Officer Suda was a relatively new officer at the department. I believe he had 2 or 3 years at the time of this incident. Officer Suda, in that time, had acquired multiple commendations from the department for his work. He had received I refer to it as an attaboy, a good job letter from a county commissioner by the name of Dan Deming, which is included in your notebook. Officer Suda was also in the process of setting up a tactical casualty care course. I think I got that right. Basically, it was a plan to provide law enforcement officers in the community with on-site tactical care to the extent that like the military uses. He was going to set up a course. He actually went to Oklahoma State to train, get certified to do this. He was going to set up a course to train other law enforcement officers to apply tactical casualty care in a emergency situation. This course was designed to, save the lives of Hutchinson Police Department officers. After the investigation, it is my understanding that that course doesn't exist. It never got off the ground. He and another officer who was involved in this incident were unable to continue working on that. It should also be noted that Officer Suda was a EVOC instructor, that's EVOC. He was able to instruct other officers in the community and the surrounding communities in the training or the ability to drive emergency vehicles. Once again, he was putting his best foot forward to give the department everything he had. He was also, and it is important for this case, he was also ARIDE certified, that's ARIDE. And that is Advanced Roadside Impairment something. Basically, he was he was trained to detect impaired drivers. He had advanced training, could do advanced tests. He had the ability to see all of these different indicators. And during this entire instance, Officer Suda made the determination based on all of that advanced training that he didn't have a reason to conduct field sobriety testing. Now again, the arbitrator went a different way on that. We're not here to dispute that, but it's just another example of the best foot forward that Officer Suda was giving this community prior to this incident. Now, like I mentioned at the top, I want to move on to the city manager's city manager's decision to reject the arbitrator's award. The arbitrator did find that there were 2 violations. He didn't give Officer Suda a suspension. He decided to reinstate without back pay. Now, if Officer Suda is reinstated today, that is nearly a year-long suspension without pay from the department. It is a stiff penalty, but nevertheless, the arbitrator decided that Officer Suda should be reinstated because he had not lied. Now, the arbitrator's award was, I believe, 52 pages. The rejection by the city manager, and I understand there are time constraints in the contract, but the decision by the city manager was 2 pages. Now, I understand that brevity is not an indication that it's a poor decision, but the letter itself fails to touch on any substantial evidence. Now, the city manager agreed with 2 of the 3 findings. He agreed that the body camera policy was violated. He agreed that Officer Suda should have conducted field sobriety tests. He did not, however, agree that Officer Suda lied. Now, the city manager made a few statements in his letter to support this position. First, he discounted the arbitrator's decision because it referenced a case that some of you sat in on a few years ago when my colleague Don Aubrey presented to you, and that was the case regarding Charles Malvo. Now, the city manager stated in his letter that the arbitrator relied heavily on that decision in reaching his own decision in this case. I looked through the arbitrator's award after receiving that letter. There are 2 references to that case. The first is when the arbitrator references my position in the case, and the second will be found on page 49 of the arbitrator's award. There are 2 paragraphs on page 49. The arbitrator essentially says that in that case, arbitrator Kossoff, who handled that case, went into great detail on Brady and Giglio. However, arbitrator Jacobs finished the second paragraph by saying, without delving into the area of Kansas law and whether a judge might or might not admit such evidence, the facts here were clear that the evidence fell short of establishing by clear and convincing evidence that the grievant lied anyway. What that means is that the arbitrator did not care about the Malvo award. He did not rely on it in reaching this decision. He said the discussion in that award doesn't really matter here because I determined Charles Malvo lied. Sorry, arbitrator Kossoff determined Charles Malvo lied. Arbitrator Jacobs determined Jonathan Suda did not. So the Kossoff award, the Malvo award, does not apply here, doesn't matter. Yet, the city manager's letter discounts the award because the arbitrator relied heavily on arbitrator Kossoff's decision from 2014. Now, the other statement in the city manager's letter is that the city went to great lengths to conduct a fair and impartial investigation. Now, this is a reference to the Duckett report I mentioned earlier, the $30,000 report that was prepared. Now, I don't want to dig into that 42-page monstrosity that was put together. I discussed that at length in my post-hearing brief. You all have that. It's an exhibit in your notebook. I'm sure you've read it. However, I do want to point out, just for the record here, that Mr. Duckett pointed out like 4 things in his report that Officer Suda was alleged to have lied about. Now, one of these things was a claim that Officer Suda grew very agitated and denied having any concerns about writing his supplemental brief at the direction of Captain Troy Hoover. And I'm quoting from his report there. A review of his interview transcript, which is Exhibit 36 in your notebook, and I would give you a page number, but a review of the transcript reveals that Officer Suda was never actually asked about any concerns that he had. He was never asked if he went to the FOP and voiced those concerns. Yet, Doug Duckett wrote in his report that he grew agitated and denied ever making those statements. That isn't anywhere in that transcript, and it's not on the audio if you listen to the audio. This is the kind of stuff that was included in that report, and that's why the arbitrator found it worthless. He didn't give it any weight because he wasn't there to defend it, he wasn't there to explain anything, and some of these statements are just outright false. And just to be clear for the record, Officer Suda was concerned about writing that supplemental report. However, he was directed by Captain Troy Hoover to do that months after the investigation. But as you can see, the Duckett report itself, the fair and impartial investigation, is much closer to a complete fabrication. There are so many inaccuracies in there just based on the interviews he conducted. Not to mention the fact, and it was raised at the hearing, not to mention the fact that the interview was scheduled after Officer Suda had worked a full night shift, didn't have any sleep, and he and 3 other officers were ordered to be there at the same time. And the interviews were conducted from, if I remember correctly, because I was here all day, it was 9 or 10 a.m. all the way until 6 p.m. that day. These officers didn't get a chance to sleep, just had to sit and wait their turn. It was a very lengthy interview that resulted in just complete and total inaccuracies being included in his report. Now, I would love to ask Mr. Deardoff questions about his decision today. However, the parameters that were set forth to me do not allow for any cross-examination of the city manager. So the union is in a position where we are unable to actually ask why. What specific statements did Officer Suda make? What specific issues did the city manager have with the arbitrator's award? These questions can't be asked by me today. However, he simply states, the substantial and overwhelming evidence clearly supports that the grievant was discharged for just cause and that the grievant was untruthful, intentionally evasive, contradictory, and deceptive during the city's investigation. There's no evidence in support of that in the letter. There's no references to any exhibits. There's no citation to any case law, nothing. It is just a conclusory statement prepared by the city manager and sent to the FOP. These are, at the end of the day, the definition of a baseless allegation. There's no basis for it in that letter. And I would love to be up here addressing the concerns that he had to you, but as far as I can tell, there were only 2, and I've done that. Now, it's your job today to make a decision. You are the final step in the grievance procedure. Your decision must be based on substantial evidence. It can't be arbitrary, and it's got to be within the scope of your authority. Those are the rules under the law. Now, under the contract, it is the arbitrator's duty to find facts, and he did so. He wrote 52 pages of facts after he spent weeks working on the decision. That award is the only part of this case that has been handled by a true neutral. He is the only person who was not appointed by the city, who doesn't work for the city. He's the only person who came in here with a truly neutral perspective, reviewed all the evidence with a truly neutral perspective, and put together what is a truly neutral award. It is not good for the FOP, but it does recommend reinstating Officer Suda. Now, he found mistakes were made. He did, and we're not, again, Officer Suda has never disputed that. There were mistakes made. Our position was that policy wasn't violated. The arbitrator didn't find it that way. However, there's no evidence that Officer Suda lied to Mr. Duckett, and there was no evidence that he lied at any other point. And it's another point that needs to be raised is I sat in with Officer Suda during every interview that he did from start to finish. We did one with Doug Duckett. We did one with Chief Hooper. I didn't sit in with the second one with Chief Hooper. I apologize. I misstated. I couldn't get down here for that one. Sat in with the first one with Chief Hooper. I was there during the arbitration hearing, and I'm here now. Officer Suda has never been specifically asked about any one statement that he made that was a lie. He is asked on every occasion, both with Chief Hooper and then at the arbitration hearing, it was asked what did he lie about. Now, the Missouri attorney that the city has hired to handle this case included in his post-hearing brief a number of statements that were alleged lies. Those statements were never brought up at the arbitration hearing. Those statements were never given to the FOP as this is what we're talking about. Yeah, we had the transcripts. I didn't consider any of that to be dishonesty, but nobody ever raised the point for the FOP to respond to those statements to clarify. Instead, we went through an entire arbitration hearing when no one could actually say what Officer Suda lied about. Then we got a post-hearing brief that included a bunch of statements that weren't raised at the hearing. Officer Suda's never had a true opportunity to respond to any of these allegations because they weren't given to him. Now, you have an obligation to make this decision based on substantial evidence. You can't be arbitrary about this. The only person who heard live testimony in this case was arbitrator Jeffrey Jacobs. He's the only person that heard anybody talk under oath. He made the decision. He weighed every piece of evidence in that notebook, and he spent a hell of a lot longer on it than a week. And he made the decision to reinstate or to recommend that Officer Suda be reinstated. He determined that Officer Suda did not lie, that the city could not prove that he lied, even after additional statements were added in the post-hearing brief that weren't raised at the arbitration hearing. The city manager didn't review any live testimony. As I understand it, he had an opportunity to review the evidence, but he's reviewing what is essentially a paper record. He doesn't get a chance to see Officer Suda testify under oath. He doesn't have the opportunity to determine credibility as to whether or not somebody is telling the truth. He just has to review a record within a week and make a determination. And based on the contractual provisions, the city manager doesn't have an opportunity to even hear legal arguments as you do today. There's no chance for me and Mr. Thomas to get together and present legal arguments to him. So I'm going to wrap this up for you guys. But in conclusion, the FOP and Officer Suda are only asking for fairness in this process. The only neutral individual recommended reinstatement. Now, went through the investigation. That thing is a hit piece. Mr. Duckett put together a report full of fabrications. Honestly, it is it is the false aspect of this case. And during the predisciplinary hearing, Chief Hooper, based on that report, accused Officer Suda of lying during the investigation, but was not able to provide a single statement to Officer Suda as to what the lie was about. There were no specific allegations raised during the arbitration hearing as to what Officer Suda lied about. He was constantly told that the circumstances as a whole indicated dishonesty here. The allegations made in the city's post-hearing brief were the first time those allegations were ever raised. Officer Suda didn't have a chance to respond to those. Nevertheless, with the hundreds of pages and hours of audio, Arbitrator Jacobs determined that the city did not prove that Officer Suda lied to Mr. Duckett or anyone else during this case. So I ask you today to not do anything crazy. All we want is the arbitrator's award to be followed in its entirety. He spent months working on this. He was in contact with attorneys. He had the chance to hear live testimony. He determined that Officer Suda didn't lie. It is the FOP's position that the city manager's decision was arbitrary in nature and that the arbitrator's award be implemented. And this is simply reinstatement to the Hutchinson Police Department without back pay. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, and I am available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, and thank you for staying within the parameters described. All right, I believe then that would bring up the counter argument.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Henry Thomas. I'm an attorney with Polsinelli. I'm external counsel representing the city. Although I do practice in Missouri, I was born and raised in Kansas, and I actually went to law school with Mr. Huntsman. So we both went to Kansas for law school. I'm here because the city manager's decision must be sustained based on the evidence in the record. In order to overturn the city manager's decision today, you must find that his decision was clearly arbitrary, capricious, or wholly unsupported by the evidence made available to you already. In short, Mr. Suda should not be reinstated because the arbitrator sustained the first two charges against Mr. Suda, each of which the arbitrator described as serious errors. The first is Mr. Suda deliberately shut off his body camera in violation of General Order 67.1 as part of to further a police cover-up. Second charge, Mr. Suda deliberately failed to conduct impairment testing in violation of General Order 63.2 to further a police cover-up. Regarding the third charge against Mr. Suda that opposing counsel spent a significant amount of time on was with regard to Mr. Suda's truthfulness. The arbitrator, in short, incorrectly presumed, without any explanation, that he needed to find that Mr. Suda violated all three charges against him in order to uphold the termination. That presumption was an egregious error and an egregious flaw because it was incorrect. The record clearly demonstrates that those two, what the arbitrator termed as serious errors, charges 1 and 2, alone are sufficient to warrant termination. Nonetheless, even if those two charges were somehow inefficient to warrant termination, which they are not, the city manager's decision to fire Mr. Suda should be sustained because the record clearly demonstrates that Mr. Suda provided untruthful and intentionally evasive, contradictory, and deceptive responses in violation of General Order 1.10 and the Employee Handbook Standards of Conduct to further a police cover-up. Mr. Suda's untruthfulness will be discussed further in detail throughout this presentation. But for now, it's important to understand the severity and the context of Mr. Suda's actions, because I know you all have had the materials that have been provided to you and have reviewed it, and due to my time restrictions, I cannot walk you through each fact and each video and each audio recording that was part of the record and that has been presented. I'm going to show you some of those today, but there are many more recordings and videos that I just don't have time to go through today. Thus, I defer to the detailed facts that were exhausted with regard to each instance of inconsistent and untruthful testimony that the city provided in its post-arbitration brief, which is Exhibit 47. What I would like to show to you if we can begin the first PowerPoint. What I would like to show to you is salient parts from some of the audio recordings and videos to help you understand the severity of Mr. Suda's egregious actions. First, you will hear from a couple of the 7 911 calls. These are the calls that started the events that transpired, all of the events on February 25th, 2018. The undisputed evidence demonstrates Mr. Suda had knowledge that there were multiple 911 calls detailing Ms. Rosowski's erratic driving. And for my own sake, I'm going to refer to her as Miss Anna from here on out. I'm going to continue to stumble over her last name if not. The record further shows that officers with decades of experience had never heard of a single traffic stop resulting in this many 911 calls or this many calls from different citizens.
Reno County 911. Yes, we're on Highway 96, just crossing OB Road, going westbound, and there's a Infinity SUV, license plate 544 KYN, speeding all over the road, speeding up, slowing down, making people run off the side of the road just to get around her.
Reno County 911. I am calling. There's a car that is westbound on K96 near the Bueller Haven Road. It's a Lexus, small SUV, swerving in and out of traffic. It's got traffic backed up considerably. I'll get the mile marker for you here in a minute. It's currently driving down the middle of the road, swerving clear over into the grass, clear over to the other side, right at Bueller Haven exit. Okay, you mean Bueller and Haven don't run together? Oh, well, Bueller, Haven. Haven Road? Haven Road. Okay. And you said it was clear over into the grass as well? Oh, it's clear over into he's gone clear over into the grass several times, clear back over into the other lane of traffic. Okay, can you safely see a tag number? Reno County 911.
Yeah, my name is Keith Brendel. I'm currently northbound on Yoder Road. We're about a mile south of 50 Highway. There is an Infinity QX60, license plate number 544 KYN.
You said, where are you at on Yoder?
Yoder Road. We're about 3/4 of a mile south of 50 Highway, headed north. There's an Infinity QX60, license plate 544 KYN. It's all over the road. He's been across the center line, on the shoulder, inconsistent speeds. I don't know if he's got a medical emergency or what. We just passed Illinois Avenue. And he's crossing in front of a semi right now.
He's coming across the center line?
Yeah, he got back over in time.
Are they are they going northbound?
Yeah, northbound. We're almost to 50 Highway.
Okay.
I see this guy causing a wreck, or woman, whoever's driving, so.
You still have eyes on him?
Yes, they're approximately 100 yards straight ahead of me.
Okay. Are they still having trouble, you think?
Yes.
Okay, give me just a second.
They just slammed on their brakes again.
Are you able to see who's inside?
No, I can't see because of how many people are inside due to the headrests on the backs of the seats in the vehicle.
Okay.
Next, it will be helpful to review the limited...
Okay, I'm going to keep you on this.
It will be helpful to review the limited video footage from that day. It'll be important to note the driver's visible impairments as you see the footage. And it's also helpful to remember that before you see the driver in these videos, it's worth noting that this driver had been driving for almost 50 minutes at recorded speeds of 45 miles per hour across the highway, almost hitting a semi-truck into the grass, all of which occurred with an infant in the back seat. It's also important to note that Mr. Suda contends, while we watch these videos, that there were no signs of impairment at any time. It's important to note that because it's important to weigh the credibility of that testimony and that fact as to whether or not you believe there are any signs of impairment. The first officer reporting to the scene, his body camera.
What's going on?
That's when it was shut off. This is a body camera video from the second officer report on the scene, which is Mr. Suda. That's when the video shut off. We're going to play this again at certain points just to take note of where the driver's head is at first, and also to identify that throughout this video, it remains motionless outside the driver's side window. And there's your kind of first instance of seeing her head outside the window. That's the first instance where Officer Rivers tells Mr. Suda to cut his camera. That's the second instance where Mr. Suda is told to cut his camera, and as you can see, the head it still has not moved. And that's the third instance where he's instructed to shut off its mouth, to shut off his camera, and the driver's head still remained motionless. Unfortunately, these videos from the scene itself are limited because of the actions of Mr. Suda and Mr. Rivers in improperly shutting them down. We do, however, have some footage from the dash cam of the vehicle that followed the driver, Miss Anna, that was located directly behind the vehicle. And that's Miss Anna driving right now with Mr. Rivers' car following her. And this is when the stop first occurs. Couple of things worth noting. The first is she's in park during a green light, has to move from park and shift from park to drive in order to go through the light. As she goes through the light, you can note that the light is yellow. She was at the green light for long enough that by the time she started moving, it was yellow. You'll see her swerve quickly to overcorrect, and by the time she finishes going through the intersection, the light's already red. Again, this is relevant because it goes to the story as to whether or not there are any indicators of any sort of impairment, drug or alcohol, or whether there's any medical condition that should have required any testing whatsoever. The next video or next clip is part of the same video. We're going to take a look that at no point in the record does record support strike that. The record supports that at no point did any officer ask the most basic DUI or other impairment type questions, such as, have you been drinking? Are you on any drugs? That's undisputed. And also what's undisputed is throughout this whole stop, there has been no verbal responses from the driver. Yet, again, Mr. Suda contends, there are no signs of impairment. This dash cam continues to go on. You see Mr. Suda walk up. More importantly, you'll see as soon as he walks up, that's when he cuts his camera, and then immediately walks around the car to get in the driver's side seat or the passenger's side seat. Again, the record demonstrates that it's undisputed that it's highly out of the norm, and it's not proper procedure for any officer to get into the passenger side seat of a suspected DUI. And the testimony from that's undisputed in the record shows that Mr. Suda, when he arrived at the scene, presumed it was DUI. And he acknowledges that for presumed DUI, you should have your body camera on at all times. However, it's inexplicable as to why, in this instance, it was shut off. It's inexplicable as to why, upon arriving to the scene, he decides to go around the car and get into the passenger side of the vehicle. Mr. Suda has since contended that he was doing so to conduct further DUI and testing to smell if there are any odors. But again, as far as whether any other officer is aware of this procedure of getting into the passenger side seat of a suspected DUI, the record's pretty clear that that's highly unusual, abnormal, and not within the protocols of the department. The next clip we're going to take a look at from this dash cam before it gets shut off by the officers is, if you could see right now, the silhouette of the driver's side, the driver, that's Miss Anna. In the passenger side seat right now is Mr. Suda. And you'll see the silhouette from Miss Anna fall into the lap of Mr. Suda. Here we go. And it remains there for approximately 12 seconds or so. We don't know how much longer after that because, again, as I stated, the dash cams were shut off improperly at that time. After this stop, Mr. Suda directs Miss Anna to scoot over inside the car, over the console, into the passenger side seat, so he can get into the driver's side seat. Again, out of the norm, and it's undisputed in the record that it's not normal if there's a suspected DUI or even any medical impairment to have the driver scoot over the console instead of walking around her own vehicle. At this point, Mr. Suda drives the vehicle back to the LEC. The record supports, and although Mr. Suda contends that it was in order, the record supports that it's highly unusual and not within the norm to drive anyone suspected of DUI or any sort of medical impairment back to the law enforcement center. The protocol requires you to perform testing, which, as we talked about, the arbitrator did not find occurred here, or to seek medical attention, which was not done here. There's been vague references to some medical condition that is undefined, but if that were the case, we've got an odd situation here because there were no protocols followed with regard to performing any sort of medical test as they were trained. It's worth noting as well that, as stated in the arbitrator's decision, a text found on Mr. Suda's phone was an instruction to bring Miss Anna back discreetly, quote, discreetly, to the law enforcement center. After driving Anna back to the LEC, Mr. Suda takes Anna to the restroom. She's in there for so long that he becomes concerned for her safety and has to go into the women's restroom. Again, his testimony is that there were no signs of impairment, yet she was unable to drive her own vehicle back to the LEC, and he was so concerned for her safety that he went into the women's restroom to check on her. But there are no signs of impairment or any issue. After his contact with Miss Anna had concluded, Mr. Suda goes into one of the LEC's interrogation rooms to call his sergeant, and this was referenced by Mr. Huntsman in his testimony. You'll hear and watch Mr. Suda as he makes his call to discuss what had occurred and how it does or does not fit within the policies and what they should do to address those in case they are questioned about their actions. Unbeknownst to Mr. Suda, the interrogation room automatically recorded his side of the conversation when he entered and turned on the lights.
What's up, Sarge? Hey, so on a real note, how do we go about this without throwing somebody under the bus? Well, I mean, he wants an email, and the way I see it is if Captain Rouse said that he wants me and Rivers or Captain told Rouse to have me and Rivers send him getting the captain an email about what we, did and saw and all that stuff. Now, I mean, how do we go about this without, I know personally, just from history here, that if I get called into the captain's office, I'm asking for an FOP rep. I just...
Not like these whole thing, but it's something that
right.
So, yeah. I call in and let him know. The captain wants to know what's happening.
Right.
So, and don't worry about I mean, this is part of life, this happens.
Right. Well, what I'm worried about is more the driving pattern, and then we didn't do anything about that. And then I don't want to throw you under the bus. I don't want to throw you under the...
The investigator, the chief of police, the arbitrator, and the city manager each independently found Mr. Suda deliberately shut off his body camera and deliberately failed to conduct impairment testing to further a police cover-up. The record evidence supports that alone is sufficient to warrant termination. To the extent it isn't, the record evidence demonstrates that Mr. Suda was untruthful and deceptive in his responses. Those specific allegations of inconsistencies and contrary testimony by Mr. Suda have been already detailed in the city's brief, pages 28 to 41 of Exhibit 47. However, we're not going to even get into that. You don't need to look any further than the arbitrator's own decision for evidence of Mr. Suda's untruthfulness. Although the union contends the arbitrator found Suda did not lie, that is misleading and not entirely accurate. Although the arbitrator did find that there was insufficient clear evidence to support that Mr. Suda lied with regard to investigator Duckett's conclusions, the arbitrator found Mr. Suda's explanations and story strained credibility, quote, flew in the face of common sense, was, quote, not true, and changed over time. We can look at the next PowerPoint. While we're pulling up the next PowerPoint.
Well, and like I said, they can pull up, and that's kind of what.
Todd, there's another, I got it. These are excerpts from the arbitrator's own decision. It's his own words reflecting Grievance Suda's untruthful and intentionally evasive, contradictory, and deceptive responses. With regard to comments about police cover-up, again, it's worth noting that there are two stories that have been presented. One is that these officers turned off their cameras to protect one of their own, to further this police cover-up, and then were untruthful or not completely forthcoming when it came to their testimony into the investigation. The other story that's been told is by Mr. Suda, that there was no indicators of impairment and that the body cameras were shut off merely to protect Miss Anna's privacy. It's important to look at these statements and then look at the findings by the arbitrator to determine which story was credible. The arbitrator found there was no doubt based on the record that if the driver had been anybody else, i.e. a member of the motoring public who had just been stopped by police after multiple reports of driving erratically and acting the way Ms. Rosanowski did, both officers would have had their body cameras on. He also found Grievance Suda made it repeated references to, quote, throwing people under the bus, unquote, so to speak, in that conversation. It would strain credibility to assume that the grievant had no concerns about what had just happened. Arbitrator also said it was also clear that another car was dispatched to retrieve Grievance Suda's car, and that when that person gets there, he read the text from various other officers regarding the order to drive Ms. Rosanowski's vehicle to the law enforcement center and to do so, quote, discreetly, end quote. The arbitrator also found, questioning, why was she not allowed to drive back to the law enforcement center given her condition, if again, she was not impaired at all? Clearly, she was not okay to drive back to the LEC and was unable to drive her vehicle safely, even after the stop itself. He also found it was abundantly clear that if the driver had not been a police officer, this would have been handled very differently. As stated before, Mr. Suda has taken the position that, and he specifically has stated, I never thought of testing Officer Anna because I had no grounds to ask her to test. Again, it's worth noting the arbitrator's comments and findings with regard to the credibility of such a statement. The arbitrator found Grievance Suda argued that there were no reasons to test Ms. Rosanowski since she exhibited no signs of drug or alcohol impairment at the scene. The obvious problem with this whole line of assertions is that almost everything about the stop screamed impairment. He also found Grievance Suda's eventual admission of this was taken into account here and perhaps showed that he learned something from this, but could also be related to the fact that by the time he eventually acknowledged it, months later, he knew that he was facing possible discharge. And that's with regard to Suda's at least eventual admission that he probably should have done impairment testing, yet he continued to testify and stay true that there was no indicators of impairment. But because of all the investigations that occurred, in retrospect, he should have done testing. The arbitrator's finding that is as stated. He continued to say, on this record, though, it was clear that despite Grievance Suda's claim that he had, quote, nothing to go on, end quote, to conduct impairment testing, there should clearly have been some form of testing or assessment well beyond what was done here. Frankly, it would be naive to accept the claim that there was nothing wrong with her and no reason to perform a field sobriety test of some sort at that point. This was a matter that Grievance Suda eventually acknowledged, but not until much later in this process. Again, from the city's perspective, not acknowledging something during an investigation where you're told to be forthcoming and truthful, or it could lead to your termination. It doesn't matter if you eventually, down the road, when confronted on how incredulous it sounds, admit to it. You were still not forthcoming and untruthful when you were instructed to be truthful as part of the investigation. Bottom line, they should have done a field sobriety test of some sort, and the failure to do so on this clear record, again, can logically lead to the conclusion that they were trying to protect a fellow officer in violation of the policy. That's on page 45 of the arbitrator's decision. These are excerpts from his decision. The next statement that was worth examining is the quote from Mr. Suda that we saw it was Anna and she was crying, so I turned my body camera off so we could keep her personal matters private. It's worth noting whether or not the arbitrator believed that the cameras were shut off to keep her matters private, or the city's argument that they were shut off to further a police cover-up and to hide the evidence. The arbitrator found, accordingly, Grievance Suda's decision to turn off the body cam, even though he did so after Officer Rivers motioned to him, was not completely due to the desire to protect Ms. Rosanowski's private matters. On this record, it was clear that the decision was made to protect a fellow officer from the consequences of what at the time the camera was turned off, a clear desire to protect her from the possible criminal consequences of driving erratically with a child in her car. The fact that they did not would certainly lead the casual observer to the inescapable conclusion that these officers were trying to protect one of their own, not so much from the embarrassment of being in a mentally vulnerable state, but rather from the possible legal consequences of driving in that manner with a child in that car. It was clear that the officers on the scene were trying to keep things quiet and to get Ms. Rosanowski out of harm's way and to protect her from the possible consequences of driving so dangerously with a child in the car. Again, these are different excerpts where the arbitrator continues to comment on the credibility of Grievance' story. Grievance Suda's logic about being a, quote, police officer at all times, and that this fact somehow absolved him of the responsibility of having the body cam on during the stop, did not ring true here at all. Grievance Suda maintained for a considerable period of time that Ms. Rosanowski was not a, quote, citizen, unquote, and that he did not therefore have to activate the body cam. Frankly, the arguments put forward in support of the action to turn off the body cam flew directly in the face of the above policies and common sense. Again, these are the arbitrator's words commenting on Suda's story. To get to the ultimate point as to why the arbitrator found that Suda's story was so incredulous, flew in the face of common sense, strained credibility, and did not ring true at all, yet found that in this limited sense that there was not clear evidence that Mr. Suda lied, is because he based his decision on the incorrect and flawed presumption that what was at issue was Investigator Duckett's findings of Suda being untruthful. That's the same argument that Mr. Huntsman raised. That's an incorrect presumption. If you read our brief, the city's brief, you'd see that it wasn't going off of Investigator Duckett's conclusions. Chief Hooper did his own investigation. He reviewed all the evidence. He listened to the audio. He reached his own conclusions, and he also did his own interviews to address the inconsistencies. So this focus on the limited 4 instances that Investigator Duckett found where Mr. Suda was untruthful is not relevant, and it's entirely missing the point. What's relevant is Chief Hooper's finding that this story, that the arbitrator even says, strains credibility, flies directly in the face of common sense, and just does not ring true. That's what Chief Hooper found. In conclusion, termination is never easy. Chief Hooper didn't want to be put in this position. The city didn't want to be put in this position. Yet this is an instance where the city should be commended for taking the right action. When it learned of a possible cover-up possibly involving superior officers, the city manager and his HR director did the right thing. They engaged a third-party investigator. We keep referring to a $30,000 report. That's a third-party investigator from out of town who knows nobody in this town, didn't even know about Hutchinson, who has no ties and could be completely unbiased. The union continually kept referring to the only neutral being the arbitrator. Conveniently, he forgets that the guy who flew in, knowing nobody, was also a neutral. And the union has also foregone or has not acknowledged the fact that the city, in our position, we've previously been scolded by the union for not hiring someone external. Now, when we hire someone external, we're being scolded for the price tag that goes along with it. The city in this instance should be commended because they got the outside investigator. They were able to uncover all of the police cover-up, and also the chief of police should be commended for taking a zero-tolerance policy for any officers involved in damaging the public trust or engaging in a police cover-up. Instead of commending the city and the chief of police for taking the correct measures to conduct a fair investigation and clean up any police cover-up, the union has appealed the determination. We are where we are now. Again, the city manager's decision must be sustained based on the evidence in the record. Mr. Suda should not be reinstated for deliberately shutting off his camera and for deliberately failing to conduct impairment testing to further a police cover-up. In addition, Mr. Suda should not be reinstated because he provided untruthful, deceptive, evasive, and contradictory answers during an investigation into his misconduct. Thank you.
Thank you. And you took it right up to the minute, so appreciate you staying within the constraints as well. Council, I'd like to draw your attention to the ground rules that I'd read earlier, and this brings us to item number 6, which again I'll read. Says, once each side has made its presentation, only city council members will be permitted to ask questions of the attorneys and or any witnesses that are present at the hearing. So I would stand for if there was anybody on the council who is looking for clarification or that. I would also notate that if this is our decision to be made, and if there's a motion to do so, that is also applicable, but I don't want to be presumptuous on either measure, so I will grant you some time to think about that. Anybody?
I did have a question. It was there was a little bit of uncertainty on my part as to whether Officer Suda was placed on the Brady Giglio list.
Yes. Someone outside of...
If I could only interrupt for a second, and I don't know procedurally, but I feel like if we're going to be asking questions of one, then maybe the other. Is that something we can direct to our city council?
Sure.
I didn't mean to
that's
preempt you, but it's only fair we've allowed one.
Mayor, let me suggest that the questions be directed to the two attorneys.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to go the wrong way.
It's appropriate because they're the only ones addressing the council. They should be answering the questions.
And we're not obligated to equal time per se, but those are questions that need to be done. Okay. Sorry, Jake and sir.
Yes, Mr. Suda, based on what we understand, was placed on the Brady Giglio list by the district attorney, the district attorney. It's outside of our control. It was an independent decision that was reached outside of our control.
Wouldn't that, in essence, make the arbitrator's findings and even our findings moot in the sense that he wouldn't be able to fulfill something, and the job description is an essential function, accurately prepare and testify in various court proceedings? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I do find compelling evidence that there was untruths, but that's neither here nor there, really. We couldn't reinstitute someone who couldn't testify in court.
And sorry, I think it would only be fair if we allowed.
I'd love to hear some thoughts on that.
As the attorney for several of the local FOPs around the state, I deal with this a lot. The fact of the matter is, Brady and Giglio by themselves require that a prosecutor disclose impeachment evidence to the defense. Now, when it comes to Giglio, that typically includes allegations of dishonesty. In this case, were the arbitrator's award upheld, the facts that he found that there wasn't evidence of dishonesty, there wouldn't be anything to disclose. So that would make the placement of him on the Brady-Giglio list pointless. Mr. Schroeder wouldn't have anything to turn over to defense counsel.
And he's on the list currently, so then that would stand for his removal from the list? Is
That is that's the best way to describe it. He was placed on the list based on a letter sent by Chief Hooper when the investigation concluded on his side. As I've had a conversation with Mr. Schroeder, he was waiting on a final determination. If the determination is no dishonesty, it would be our position there's nothing to turn over. So then, I would have a conversation with him and just get on the same page. But if the finding is there's no evidence of dishonesty, there's nothing to turn over, and he's not on the, or he shouldn't be on the list.
I see.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
May I get a chance just to address that real quickly?
As long as it stays to the same.
Yes, and I understand Mr. Huntsman's position. I just want to clarify that, again, we're just making presumptions as to what Mr. Schrader does or does not do. We can't state with certainty. I don't doubt Mr. Huntsman's experience in other cities. I will note from our conversations that Hutchinson is different in that it isn't as large of a police force where they may be able to accommodate someone who might be on a Brady-Giglio list, as they are, from what I understand, allow in Wichita and other police departments where they're a lot larger. He or someone on that list, if he were to remain on that list, goes to your direct point, which is it'd be difficult to find value and find that they could serve a role with the police department if they were on that list.
Could the DA independently place him on the list regardless of our recommendation today?
I believe that the union will take a different position, but my answer and the city's answer is yes. And I would believe, and again, these are presumptions because we have no control over his ultimate decision, but I believe that the investigators' findings may have some relevance to him being placed on the list. And again, even if you were to reject the city manager's decision, he may still find that there were bases based on the investigations that had occurred in prior findings to keep him on the list. Again, we're speculating. This is a question for him, and I know the union's going to take a different position, so just be fair to their position.
Yeah, I mean, again, my position is if there is no finding of dishonesty, there's nothing to turn over. Obviously, that's up to Mr. Schroeder. It's also our position. It's the reason that the Malveaux case was brought up, that none of this is admissible in court anyway. So the overreaction on the Brady-Giglio issue is something I deal with constantly. But in this case, without evidence of lying, then there's nothing to turn over and nothing to do.
I don't think you can really overreact as to ensuring the integrity of a police force and upholding the public trust. So I think it is an important issue. Nevertheless, it's sufficient to warrant termination that the first two items, as found by the arbitrator, were found to have been violated. So I was just curious about that particular concern, but thank you.
Any other questions? Again, clarification purposes, or in fact a motion either direction with regards to the action on this item.
I move to confirm the city manager's decision upholding the termination of the employee Jonathan Suda.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and has been seconded. I'll allow for any additional discussion before I call for the roll.
I did want to make a comment that Mr. Huntsman had mentioned we only had a week to review this, and you're right, it's a lot of information, and I want to assure former Officer Suda that and I'm sure the rest of the council took great pains to pour over all of this because we recognize that this is a young man's livelihood and career on the line, and I don't understand how the arbitrator could have come to the conclusion that he did. I stand behind Chief Hooper and his recommendation, and believe strongly that he's building a culture of integrity that is bulletproof, and that's what needs to happen in our community to maintain public trust.
All right, thank you.
I might comment if I may.
Please.
Although I share to a degree the issue of whether or not it was clear and convincing that Officer Suda lied. For me, the other two elements were significant, and any one of the three, for me, support the action taken, because those actions removed any opportunity to really know what happened, whatever that might be. And then I am convinced that there was, and I think the arbitrator likewise, a cover-up. And I think that's unconscionable. And this wasn't just solely on Mr. Suda, but he's the person here today. And with everything that's happening across our nation in regards to police transparency, as a citizen, I want to be able to trust what comes from the police, what comes from internal investigations, and the circumstances in this case were not trustworthy in terms of what was coming from the various people involved. So anyhow, that's where I'm coming from in making the motion and being supportive of upholding the manager's decision. It doesn't take all three elements for me. There's certainly enough that talks about evasiveness, cover-up, I'm going to try to say that word again. Misleading, thank you. To as a whole, it warrants the action taken and the support by the manager to uphold that action.
Not to preclude anybody, so Nancy, if you want to say something.
I was going to say I would concur with Steve considerably. Did I find a flagrant lie? No. Did I find listening to your rationale with Investigator Duckett of why Anna should have been treated separately because she was an officer as opposed to a citizen? I found that somewhat duplicitous. I'm with Steve in that any one of the three, and you lost me, frankly, the minute you turned off your body camera, because that is such a flagrant violation of policy. Failure to conduct the tests, equally flagrant. I regret that no testing was done, because we, as Steve said, we're never going to know whether it was mental illness, whether it was something that had been ingested, and that's too bad. So I will join them in supporting.
I'd like to speak a moment to you, Mr. Suda, if I can, just eye to eye, man to man. I suspect that you would like to relive this part of your life as a professional police officer time and time and time again. And I certainly have a feeling that you would like to have turned the tide and turned the table on the procedures that you conducted yourself in the cover-up. And I know you'll live with that all your life. And but beyond that, I think the evidence is very clear and overwhelming that of the three elements of the decision, two of them were egregious cover-up violations of policy, and that simply cannot be tolerated in our police department here. And so I would uphold and continue to support the motion.
If I may, I've heard a lot of concern about two of the three elements being found by the arbitrator and that being enough. There is a plethora of case law that under just cause, which you as the city, and I believe it was you, Mr. Daveline, signed the contract with the FOP that we're under, 2018 contract. But under just cause, a termination must be reduced if you can't prove all three of the allegations. This is well established within labor law. This is a principle I would happy to brief the city council on. This isn't some sort of out of left field thing the arbitrator did. It's very well established that if you accuse him of three things, you got to prove all three to uphold the termination. And that's why the arbitrator chose to reinstate him without back pay.
Well, and that's why, thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier, and that is that after poring over these hundreds of pages and audio and video evidence, I cannot understand how the arbitrator would have come to the conclusion that there was no dishonesty. I'll point out just one thing that sealed the deal for me. The phone call that he didn't recognize was being recorded because it was conducted in an interview room. How do we go about this without throwing someone under the bus? That indicates to me, how do we reframe at best or fabricate at worst a situation that makes it such that we look like we're in line with protocol? To me, that without a shadow of a doubt proves that there was dishonesty. And that's just one point. There are several more that I've earmarked throughout here. Notwithstanding Duckett's report, other pieces of evidence, and just reading our policies and procedures, yeah.
And I take it you're an attorney when you're not on city council?
I'm not an attorney, but if you're familiar with the process of our union and how this works, we're the next step. We're the next step. So none of us are attorneys, but we're the next step, and we're the ones that are called to look at the evidence and come up with a conclusion to the best of our knowledge. And I will say that we're all pretty independent of the situation as well. I'm not a police officer. So looking at it objectively, I cannot understand how the arbitrator came to that conclusion. I do not concur with the arbitrator. I think there was flagrant dishonesty in this case.
Thank you. With that being said, and with Mr. Huntsman, what he brought to light, I will ask one more time, is there anything that would change the position of anybody that's spoken up to this point in light of that? If not, then it has been moved and seconded, and I don't mean to admonish you. I know this was a difficult situation. Some decisions were made at that time, but based on the evidence that we received and that we've seen and heard over time, I think this is the correct conclusion to this. With that being said, Linda, I would ask you to call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Daveline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. All right. Linda, if you will call the next item, please.
Item 7B, consider executive search firm recommendation.
And Tom, you presenting on that?
Yeah. Hopefully I'll have a little help. Tom Sanders, Human Resources Director. You might recall back on August 6th, the City Council directed me to work with Council members Soldner and Daveline to identify an executive search firm to use to replace our retiring city manager who's leaving in March. Shortly after that council meeting, I met with the council members that have been appointed to that team, and we developed a request for proposals, excuse me. And we also identified 6 high-quality search firms. And after putting the final touches on it, it was issued on August 28th with a return date of September 11th. We had very high interest in the project and received proposals back from all 6 firms. On September 19th, we met again to start the challenging task of narrowing the field. And as we worked through that process, we used several criteria. First was probably most important, the strength of each firm's portfolio of work. We looked at the volume of similar executive searches over the past 4 years, strong presence in the Midwest region, a diverse mix of large, medium, and small cities, and also a good solid mix of urban, suburban, and rural cities in their portfolio. We also evaluated the recruitment capabilities, especially what they would do to help identify passive candidates and market to those that may not necessarily be in the active job market, so to speak. And then we also, another important component for us was their community engagement capabilities. We looked at their tools and experience in helping councils gather important feedback from the community in a balanced and meaningful manner. And then lastly, we also looked at cost of the proposed fee. All the proposals, I would say, were pretty relatively close in terms of the expenses. They were all kind of in the upper teens to mid-20s. A little bit of variation in terms of how they structured their fees, but by and large, they're all pretty clustered pretty closely together. Following our meeting of reviewing the RFPs, we narrowed the field down to 2 finalists, and I conducted some background checks on both firms, got back with the 2 other council members, and with that, we made the decision to move forward with recommending to you today the Strategic Government Resources proposal.
Tom, I only interrupt.
Yeah.
Justin, would you do me a solid, maybe shut the door, just as they're having conversation? Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, please. Thanks, Justin. I know that's not part of your job. You were
closest to the door. And I've neglected to mention that back on October 3rd, we met in person with the primary recruiter from SGR and a gentleman by the name of Hutchinson. That meeting went really well, and again, based on everything we'd collected in terms of our checks with the firms and just their overall qualities and qualifications, we decided to move forward with recommending them to the City Council today. If you guys approve it, they are eager and ready to get moving right away. Nancy and John, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add to my commentary, but feel free. And if anybody has questions, be happy to chat.
I had a question
Yep.
about the stakeholder survey.
Mhm.
So it looked like in some of the others, that was kind of included. Do we plan on doing that?
That's going to be completely up to you guys, and
It'll be up to
something
us.
that obviously we, when we met the last time, that we really heard you guys that was an important piece. So that was part of our criteria, a very important part of our criteria.
So the question we're considering today, I noticed there wasn't a price on this, on the motion, so we could add any one of those.
For
in.
sure,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Their online stakeholder survey was an add-on.
Yeah.
They would do, like, when we're working on figuring out the descriptors for what we want this person to be able to do and look like and all that good stuff, they would hold meetings with community members that had been identified to get their input rather than an online. I mean, we could do it.
I see.
A number of different ways.
But that is
Yeah.
an add-on.
No, not
No.
the
Not the community
not
member
the
one.
meeting. The online survey is an add-on.
Oh, okay, so
Right.
Okay.
the person-to-person meetings.
Person-to-person meetings are part
Right.
of the whole package.
Okay.
Online
Yep.
survey was an extra.
Yeah.
So
Do they have an idea or a suggestion as to the size of a body of individuals from the community stakeholders?
I think it's going to vary by, council by council,
Yeah.
community by community. But I do think they'd have a lot of experience walking you guys through that and making some recommendation about what they see working and what might be,
Yeah.
You want more wisdom than noise, obviously.
Right.
So, and that's what they specialize is how do you get, again, balanced feedback that's something that you guys can use.
So, yeah, we have the opportunity to construct what this is going to look like,
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
So if we decide that we want a citizen committee
Sure.
further on down the line, we could do that.
Yeah,
if we
I think
wanted.
so.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very customizable, obviously they'll have some, based on their experience, some thoughts and recommendations, but
Yeah.
by all means, you guys are in charge.
Well, it looks like a great firm. Thanks for your work on that.
Yeah.
John and
They,
Nancy
they,
and Tom.
as I told Tom, they rose to my top just reading what they were going to do as far as the recruitment process was concerned.
Yeah.
Because I think that's going to be really important.
Over the weekend, we spoke to several community council members throughout Kansas, and there's a lot of people going through this process. And some of them are just using the league or trying to do it themselves, and I think we've
I think
That would
we
be a
better
misstep.
served
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
using a professional firm.
And through the process, and it's probably in here, and I seem to recall, but they'll walk us, I mean, they'll walk us through questions we have and
Yeah, they will
facilitate discussion.
prepare a
and
whole
Yes.
host of different questions that we can sort through and
Give
present
us
part
some
of the interview
basis to start.
process. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is going to be creating that profile of
Mhm.
what we want this person to be able to do. So,
Yeah.
I did have a question about marketing ad placements. Their base cost includes 2 ads, one state, one national. Additional ads would be at our expense. Are we feeling like a couple of national and state ad is sufficient, or are we thinking from the get-go? And I guess I'm looking
Yeah.
to you all, but also here, are we
Yeah.
expecting to spend some money to place additional ads?
I'll just speak to that. I think what we'll want to do is really, in today's world where everything's on the internet, a lot of times what you end up seeing is state agencies being connected to the national or vice versa. So to that degree, we'll have to evaluate what kind of exposure that we'll get by placing it in the national. It may make sense to do more than one state. You know, if those connections on the internet and all that aren't there. So
They've got a very broad
Yeah.
network
yeah,
themselves.
yeah,
yeah, I get
That they'll be utilizing for
They'll be
the,
utilizing.
there's nothing
Yeah.
else the passives, but.
Right.
okay.
yeah.
Did they have any suggestion of what type of application pool, I should say, in size, that they would anticipate for a city of Hutchinson, a city like Hutchinson?
We did ask that when they were here on site, and my recollection of their answer is, you know, it depends on the city, and you're gonna, I think, what they're going through the Joplin, I think at the moment, I think they've got like 60 overall applications.
Oh, wow.
Right.
But,
The short
you know,
list was 5 to 10, so I
but
assume there'd be
right,
larger
and
than that,
obviously
but
there's
yeah.
going to be people who aren't remotely qualified that apply, and you know, you screen those folks out. But you know, there's others where they maybe had 20. So you know, it's just a lot of it's just going to depend. But that's why I don't think we want to go into this underestimating the challenge of recruiting. It's better to get a whole bunch of people that and then have to screen them down versus going really conservative on the exposure and be struggling to find 3.
And that may
Yeah.
dictate how many ads we need to run,
Right.
where we need to place
Yeah.
those ads.
Yeah, and again, with their recent experience, they'll have good guidance as to, we just went through this in these cities, in this area, here's where we got the hits and the contacts and all that kind of stuff. And, it's one of those things that sometimes it gets a little bit of roll in the dice with whether or not you're just wasting your money posting it somewhere, and they'll have that experience.
Nobody got
guidance
the
and that.
impression that they had a pool of candidates that they just rehash.
no, in fact, they stressed very definitely that they did not depend
Perfect.
on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That they actively searched for those individuals whom they felt would be appropriate for the
Appropriate
position,
for our city.
and regardless of what they were currently doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may say here, where is SGR from or based
They
out
are
of?
based
kind of
out of
all
just
over
outside
the
of, I
place.
think, part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they have offices
Yeah.
in multiple
Yeah.
locations. In fact, this
And-
gentleman that we're going to work with is
Out of North
coming out
Carolina.
of Virginia,
North
North Carolina.
Yeah, if you look at their
Virginia, you're right.
if you look at their
Yeah.
RFP,
Yeah.
their
Somewhere.
executive recruitment clients: Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Louisiana, Kentucky, Kansas, Iowa, Indiana, Georgia. I mean, they're well founded and well positioned throughout the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and more and more. So.
Yeah, and some of the
Big in Texas.
some of the proposals we looked at, they had big geographical spread too. But when you looked at the cities in the Midwest, it got real light, and so that was one of the reasons why we didn't go with some of those other national firms. But they've got a really strong presence in the Midwest, and if you look at the cities and the size, it covers the spectrum. It's not all just small cities. It's not just big cities. It's the whole spectrum. So that was very appealing to us.
Very good. Any other questions of the staff or our 2 council persons who sat in on the process?
Well, I think Jade or anyway, I want to likewise, John and Nancy, thank you for
Oh,
your
you're more than welcome.
Thank you.
It was
time and
interesting.
effort.
Yep.
I'd move to approve the agreement for executive recruitment services with Strategic Government Resources and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Ister?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7C, consider Orchard Park Trail extension.
Poor Ward, did he give up?
Hello.
Good morning, by about 5 minutes. Good
About
morning.
5 minutes, that's right.
Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. So this item is for the bid results for the trail extension extending from Orchard Park towards Old Case 61. And we'll get into just a little bit of the location of this. The trail will connect just on the northeast side of the playground and then come out to 43rd Street. And along 43rd Street to the west, or to the east, I'm sorry, the ultimate goal is to get it to Old Case 61, and that's how we originally designed it, was to go all the way to Old Case 61. However, the railroad project at 43rd and this railroad here really changed our design, or will change our design for the rest of the trail. And so we decided to stop the trail short at the driveway. So there's a private driveway right here. So the trail will for now terminate at that driveway. We will do at least what's in the right of way in concrete on that driveway, so it doesn't just, so you don't have a concrete trail going through a gravel driveway. And so that's what was bid. Now is just the termination about halfway. Once the county bridge project is complete, then we'll look for a path to get it beyond the driveway all the way to Old Case 61. And the reason that our original design won't work is the elevations of that intersection are going to change significantly. The bridge deck has to be elevated. I believe the county told me 9 feet from where the deck is now to where it will be, based on the requirements of the railroad. So in order to make all those elevations work, then they'll have to start ramping up to get to that elevation 300 or 400 feet away. So that changes the roadway, changes the right of way, changes all the slopes. And so until that's designed and built, we really can't proceed with the remainder of the trail. As far as
Maybe before you get off,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're, but are we confident that regardless of the modifications to elevate the roadway and build the bridge, et cetera, that we're going to be able to make a connection to Old 61?
Yes, we've talked to the property owner that owns this property here. He's very excited about the project. He uses the park. He wants to see it complete because there is a chance that we'll actually have to buy a little bit of right-of-way or get a right-of-way agreement with that property owner. He's very supportive of
He owns property that connects to Old 61?
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah,
this
to
is all
another right of
one-
way that connects to 61?
Yeah, this is all one parcel right here.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and he already did have to sell a small piece for the bridge project already to the county. So, and that was a concern
Oh,
we
so we
had.
are
was-
confident.
We are confident,
Okay.
yeah, that he'll be willing to work with this to extend that. So.
Justin, I had a question about the original project. The original project prior to the bridge, Monkey Wrench, we budgeted 110 for that?
This was always budgeted in the hike and bike reserve, so we never had a dedicated CIP
Okay.
project. We just had the reserve funds that we've kind of been stashing for the last few years for this project.
So, and we have like 220 in there.
202, I think.
202.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to complete the second part of this all within our reserves.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's going to cost about as much as this. first
Probably.
one.
It should actually be a little bit less expensive to do the second piece. There's a few drainage structures that have to be extended right here. That we won't have that same issue on this other piece. So the rest of it should be relatively simple. We'll see when we get the design back from the county. But.
Justin, you might talk about the donor.
I was
the
gonna ask,
first
yeah.
phase of the project that started at 30th and
Yeah, so several years ago we had a donor who donated, I think it was $140-some thousand for a trail connection at 30th and K61. Really the idea was to connect Dillon Nature Center and this piece of old K61 that remains to the pedestrian bridge that goes over K61 there by Union Valley School. It was really to make a connection there, so you can get across K61 and then get to Old K61 and get to Dillon Nature Center. The reason Old K61 is important is that it's a very popular cycling route for people going up to Medora or even over to Bueller. And when new K61 was built, that section of Old K61 was left as a trail. So the idea was just to make that connection at that intersection. There was interest by the donor on making the connection over into Orchard Park. That was never part of the official agreement, was to make that connection, but there was that expectation that this would all get connected.
Are we still
So how
on
does
track with getting to Dillon
the
Nature?
Orchard Park piece, where does that fit in total into the master plan? I mean, is this just one small component of the master plan, or do we have supplemental
So yeah, the master
legs
plan,
to the master plan?
there are some additional connections. One of the big things the master plan pointed out was how segmented our trail system is. So if we
Right.
can make these small connections, that we get ourselves to a more complete system. So this is right in line with that. Trying to connect where we have trails and where we have places that people want to be that are close to a trail, but there's not a convenient way to get from that trail to that point of interest.
For clarification on my part, are we going to be able to utilize the donated funds and honor the intent of what they were looking for? Are we using it in a different application then?
The donated funds were used in that first piece.
Already done.
Yep, that's already done.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
But I think the idea, the intent was that it wasn't just going to dead end, that it would connect to the park, and then there would be some naming opportunities for that segment. That and quite frankly, we're well beyond what we should have been doing on that in terms of fulfilling that request.
But we are making progress towards
Yes.
that. So I would be in favor of looking at those naming deal, because that was a very generous
Yes, it
donation. I
was.
know the
It really
individual
was.
Yep.
was avid cyclist and park goer and so
Right.
on. So.
Are we responsible for maintaining Old K61 for that road path?
No.
The
Well,
undriven.
the part that's going to be incorporated from 30th Street roughly up to 43rd or wherever the
No,
connection
that's
is
the
made.
county.
It's in
isn't it?
county.
County.
It's in the county.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So who's so that the county is going to maintain that and keep it up as a cyclable
Old K61, yes.
Yeah.
piece of asphalt?
Yeah.
That'll probably be a conversation when something needs to happen down the road. though.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
In
Well,
theory.
words on that.
Who mows that stretch from 30th? It doesn't go all the way to 43rd, but there's a traffic circle, not a circle, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It would either be the county or the township.
Okay.
It's probably
'Cause we
the
have
county
a
because it's paved.
City of Hutchinson sign that's out there, I know.
Yeah, so there is, and you can kind of see it right here. We do own a little piece out here that actually was part of the original Orchard Park parcel. So I think that sign's right, actually it's right there. So
It's low impact cycling,
Mm-hmm.
walking, and stuff like that. So it's not going to have the same that as when it was a driven surface.
Well, sure, yeah.
But still, weeds,
Yeah.
mowing,
Yep.
crackling. So, okay.
So bid results, we had 7 bids, which kind of surprised me. It's a good thing. Low bid was Ward Davis, $95,894.80. Done a lot of work with Ward Davis. He does great work. The primary reason why he's quite a bit cheaper than everybody else is his method for the extension of the box culvert. Everybody else priced out having one custom made. And then they're going to set it with a crane. He's going to pour it in place. He ran that past the engineer. Engineer was fine with it, and so that's why. And that's actually what this number. You can see this line item here.
Item 5.
Yeah, that's what that item is. So that's a primary reason why he's low. Is he's just doing it a little bit different way. And he did talk to the engineer ahead of time to make sure that was an approved method before he bid. So.
Great.
So it is my recommendation to approve the contract with Ward Davis for $95,894.80.
Any other questions, staff, or a motion?
Motion to approve the contract with Ward Davis Builders for the construction of the Orchard Park Trail Extension for an amount of $95,894.80 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I did see Ward in the building, but apparently he lost
Yeah,
his
I think
patience, and
he
I can
did.
understand that, so.
He's always the last on the
Yeah.
list, poor guy.
Right. If you're listening, Ward, congratulations. Linda, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Next item, please.
Item 8, report of city officials.
I always forget which way to start, so I'm going to start with Jade, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Well, a few of us did have the opportunity to attend the League of Kansas Municipalities Conference in Overland Park over the weekend, actually including Monday. And a wonderful conference. You really come out of that with a lot of inspiration to do more for your community, a lot of ideas from other elected officials throughout the state. Had the chance to connect with people from Salina, McPherson, Wichita, Lindsborg, Ellis, Dodge City, Wamego, and what I heard is that they have the exact same challenges that we do, and that's so reaffirming, because when you hear from some people in the community who never go outside this community, you start to think that there's a lot of problems here that you're not maybe addressing in the right way. But you know, we all have the same challenges, and it's so helpful to hear how they're approaching things on the public safety side, on the housing side, on in some other respects. So just want to thank the city for the opportunity to attend that. Came out of that with a lot of good ideas, as I'm sure the other council members did. And one other thing I had a question about, I'm glad Chief Hooper is still here. There were some tragic events over the weekend with a police department in Fort Worth that got me thinking, do we have diversity training as part of our core police officer curriculum, or what are we doing on the proactive side to ensure that our officers, which have a great track record in this respect, are treating all citizens regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, age, et cetera, equally?
Yeah, and Chief Hooper, Chief of Police, we very much do. We have in-house training with our officers. We have 3 weeks of that before they even go off to the police academy, and part of that in-house training is that diversity type training. We talk a lot about ethics, we talk a lot about morals, we talk a lot about implicit bias and how we need to treat people, because everybody has those biases, whether you believe it or not. And so the idea of a police officer is that we can't act upon those biases. So those are all training that we give them before they go to the academy. They get additional training at the academy, and then they come back and we give them a second round of ethics and our core values and what we stand for. And so they're going to get that multiple times, even before they hit the street.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Thank you. Anything else, Chief?
No, that's it. Thank you so much.
No worries. Steve?
Just ditto what Jade said. Excellent conference, opportunity, as Jade said, to talk with a number of people, and likewise to have some discussions. It's kind of odd to say it's comforting that other people are having the same problems. I guess maybe it should be more a matter of it's reaffirming that whether we be big, small, Eastern Kansas, Central, or Western, the same kind of issues face cities, smaller ones, larger ones, as we deal with. And I think the more that we reach out to ask, how are you handling this, and have discussions, the hopefully quicker both they and we can move to a resolution or a solution or a better way of doing things. So time well spent. That's it.
John?
Nothing?
Nothing? Nancy, I'll take it.
Nancy said nothing.
Said nothing. Very fine. Again, you've heard it again. It was a great conference. A lot of great conversation with peers. And yes, I found the ones that were having the most success solving some of the problems that, although we're same but different, scalable, depending on the size of the city, we're working through collaboration with other stakeholders and entities. It was cities working with counties, counties and cities working with schools. And through that collaboration, they were having great success in seeing things through. And if I talk just long enough, I'll allow Nancy to. Nancy has nothing. Very fine. Very good. But that was it. And other than that, enjoy the fall weather and so on. I'll ask the city manager if there's anything.
I have nothing today, thank you.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
And second. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Thank you. All in attendance.
Sorry, guys.
I guess.